All right, folks, 10 a.m. Bonjour tout le monde et bienvenue. Welcome online and in person to Concordia University's Fourth Space. Thanks so much for joining us for day 2 of the colloque CIREQ Interdisciplinaire des doctorants sur le changement climatique. We are streaming to YouTube live from Fourth Space, which is located on unceded indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui. And we make this acknowledgement to bring awareness and understanding of the history of indigenous peoples and their territories that we occupy. At Fourth Space, if you're new to the space, welcome. And if you're back for day 2, welcome back. I'll tell you once again what we do here on the daily. Well, we work with our faculty members here at Concordia University, our student community, as well as staff, in order to activate the ongoing research projects and various initiatives happening at Concordia with the goal of co-creating knowledge and building community and expanding our community to greater Montreal and beyond those borders as well. And we do so by producing these daily hybrid activities and events that are open to all and free to the public as well. It's been our pleasure to collaborate with the organizers of this event, who I'll pass the floor to in just a second. Before doing so, I'll just let you know, those of you joining us online, welcome in that space. During Q&A, you're more than welcome to simply raise a virtual hand and jump into the conversation that way. We'll call on you. Otherwise, the chat is, of course, activated, and we'll be able to read out your comments, your questions and thoughts if you pop it in there. And those of you in the space, much like yesterday, if you're sitting in the audience and have a question, feel free to raise a hand and one of us will run one of these bad boys to you. Otherwise, you can just actually come up to the mic that's there on the mic stand, and we have you nicely kind of framed for the video so that everybody can see and hear you when you ask your question. Up to you. Okay, that's it for me. I'm going to pass the floor now to Nancy and Gitti. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second and last day of PhD Symposium on Climate Change. We have brought an exceptional lineup of panelists and a PhD presenter to talk about and discuss for decarbonization and renewable revolution. As you know, climate change is an pressing issue nowadays, and they are gonna to share their perspectives and their insights with us on this matter. We have a discussion panel for an hour, and after that, it will be followed by PhD presenters in 3 different areas: carbon sequestration, energy transition, and positive transformation. Each present will last for 5 minutes, and then we will have a question and answer part. Just a reminder, we have a signing instrument just behind there. If you wish, you can create your own inspiring climate change quote and hang it here, but be aware that it will be collected at 12:30, so be sure to do it before that. And to wrap up this momentous event, we are gonna to celebrate it with a cocktail. So we are very pleased to invite you to join us for a cocktail at Burtopia on Crescent Street, just a few minutes walk from here. And to ensure a smooth transition, we created a QR code. It's on the table just in front of the entrance door, so you can just scan it, and so you will be directed to the Google Map, or you can wait and we can go together to the venue. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to present our panelists that are joining to us. Firstly, thank you so much for accepting our invitation, and we are very thrilled to have you on board. Our first panelist is Alpora from Alpora Company. The second one is Shankari from Soldonom, and the last one is Frederick Vijan from Hydro-Quebec. Thank you so much, and I invite Alpora to start his presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me? Good? All right, let's talk about decarbonization. Happy Friday, first of all. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Alp Bora. I'm a mechanical engineer by graduation. I'm going to take this off, yeah? Don't mind. All right. I'm a mechanical engineer by education, studied on the other side of the town, McGill. So don't hold it against me. I'm running my own consulting firm. It's a small boutique consulting firm. We specialize in operational excellence in mining companies. And I want to talk to you about the decarbonization today. So just a quick survey, please. Who are excited about getting more electric vehicles in the streets? Yeah. Who are excited about getting more renewable energy technologies out there? Solar panels, wind turbines, right? Right. And hydro, of course, hydro, yes. So that's beautiful, right? To provide the raw materials to build those beautiful electric vehicles, the solar panels, wind turbines, who are excited for me to open a beautiful open pit mine or a copper refinery in our backyard? What? No? Come on, guys. Look, my message is clear. In a nutshell, I'm here to represent the mining companies or mining industry. I don't know if they knew I was going to do it, but here I am anyway. And my message in a nutshell is this: there's no decarbonization without mining and metals. I'm sorry, the truth hurts. This is the reality. Let me correct this though. There's no decarbonization without sustainable mining practices. Look, I got 5 minutes here, so let me tell a quick story. In the last 3-4 years, we've seen a big shift in how the auto manufacturers approach to mining industry, mining companies. More and more, we see companies like GM, Tesla, or Toyota investing in mining companies to secure their supply chain, especially around the battery metals, lithium, nickel. Of course, this comes as a direct reaction to an ever-increasing demand in electric vehicles. Last year in 2022, electric vehicle sales, global electric vehicle sales hit the tipping point. 10% of the total car sales were electric. So basically what it says is that the sales are slow up until it hits the 10%, then they take off. And so far they are following the same other successful technologies such as laptops, LED light bulbs. We've seen a similar path. And of course, this is encouraged by our politicians, right? Our wonderful Trudeau and Joe Biden, they are more and more pushing for this agenda. In US and North America, the goal is to have 100% electric vehicle car sales by 2035. That's bold. And we are told this is gonna help to save the environment. Well, I've got a question for you guys. How clean your Tesla really is? Because you see, when we compare your internal combustion engine to an electric vehicle, sure. I mean, we can argue all day long that electric vehicle is cleaner because there's no direct carbon emissions, sure. But where we get the electricity it really depends, right? And the carbon intensity varies where we get this electricity. In Canada, especially in Quebec, we are lucky. We are very lucky to have this abundant hydropower. Same with the British Columbia. But then look at other provinces, Nova Scotia or Alberta, still rely on the fossil fuel power generation. Then there are the raw materials required to build this electric vehicle, guys. So when you remove the steel and aluminum that is used in the frame, you look at the 6 times more metals and minerals in the electric vehicles. In terms of the graphite, copper, nickel, manganese, cobalt, electric vehicles require 6 times more metals. Somebody got to mine those things and process them. Listen, I believe that the future of transportation involves us moving away from fossil fuels, right? It's just, and we like silver bullets for some of our existential questions, but what I'm saying is that if we are not careful in this push for electric vehicles, we might create even more problems in the future. And the sad part is that the renewable energy technologies share similar stories. To fully offset the fossil fuel power generation with the renewable energy technologies. And I'm just thinking about the top of mind, the solar panels and the wind turbines. The raw materials required to build these technologies is monumental. Simon Michaud, I put in the bottom left here, great reading material, bit long, but great. He estimated that we're gonna need 27 billion new solar panels, that's with a B, and 2 million new wind turbines. So I think at this point, it's safe to say that we need mining and metals to decarbonize the industry. But considering that the mining industry is responsible for 7 to 9% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and when you include the steel production and aluminum refineries, the copper refineries, all that, the percentage goes all the way to 15 to 20%. If mining isn't clean, can we call renewable energy clean? Yes and no, right? So we have to make mining sustainable for us to realize our decarbonization dreams. I call this a sustainable culture. I got 2 more minutes. I'm going to wrap it up quickly. I call this the sustainability culture. In my book that was published earlier, I brought a couple copies, so I'm happy to share whoever interested. If you can't sleep at night, it's great reading material. So in the book, what I'm putting is we have to have an approach to influence the mining industry and make mining more responsible and more sustainable. It's a 3-step approach: awareness, investment, and mindset shift, called AIM framework. Just want to leave you guys with a quick idea on the awareness piece, because the sustainability, like anything else, starts with awareness. As a mining advocate, I've been pushing to spread the message about the metals and minerals used in our products. And I usually say that, did you know that there are over 20 different metals and minerals in a cell phone, iPhone? But the challenge is more difficult than that, because we don't have the visibility or easy access to see what kind of metals and minerals are used in our products. So the dream is, what if this information, the lithium and all that, were available just like in your Pepsi can? You can see the nutrition facts, ingredient list. What if we could have the same idea with the products that we buy? You go to the Apple store, you buy a new iPhone. Let's say you scan a QR code, and boom, you see the supply chain. You see in this Pepsi can, it is aluminum. What if we could see where it was mined as a bauxite, then transformed into alumina, then it was smelted in the aluminum, then manufactured in this Pepsi can? And what was its carbon footprint throughout the whole process? Now imagine if we have this visibility, how it would impact the mining industry, to actually make the supply chain visible, transparent, and traceable. So just like choosing a Pepsi can or any drink or any meal, you look at the calories. Imagine doing this with the products we buy, then we choose the products that use sustainably mined mining products. I believe that's gonna influence the change the way the industry operates. Just want to leave you guys with that idea, and happy to answer any questions during the panel discussion. Are we doing good with time? All right, thank you. Sure.
Hello? There we go. Thank you so much. Wow. That's very interesting. Up next, we have Sean Curry from Sol Dunham.
There we go. Good morning, everyone. I am an engineer, degreed with the Naval Academy. The pleasure of having careers in the Navy, in the submarine force, intelligence community, and then did some work doing digital transformation in the private sector. And now I'm with Soldunum. And we make energy storage systems in the state of Virginia, very close to Washington, D.C. It is a great and exciting field to be in, and excited to talk to you guys about what we're doing. Just briefly on why energy storage is important, and well, let's go back.
Just give me a sec. I think it has a mind of its own all of a sudden.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about why energy storage is important, what is it, and how is it used, and then happy to answer any questions during the panel.
Sorry.
No worries. Just to kind of keep the flow going. So, as far as why you would want energy storage, just some basic things. Resilience is, very important, right? So, I know you probably have been seeing the things happening in the U.S. over the past couple of years. The state of Texas lost power, and then a few months ago, electric grid substation in North Carolina was a target of a physical attack. The electric grid is under attack physically, through cyber means, and climate change, severe weather. In the U.S., especially, we're looking at the upcoming hurricane season, and there are certain states that you just lose power every year, and typically people will have gas generators to be prepared for that contingency. It's in many cases, the gas generators kill more people than the actual weather event, just improper use. So battery energy storage is a great way to do that in a way that's environmentally friendly, much safer, and is more reliable. So resilience is important. And then from a utility scale and even from a homeowner's scale, there's cost savings involved. By incorporating battery energy storage, you can reduce your electric bill or get rid of it altogether. And then from the utilities perspective, it's a valuable tool to minimize the number of machines that have to be running. And then sustainability, right? So, when you look at, we're still at the point in the U.S. where we're, less than 50% of our power is coming from renewables. In Canada overall, you're above 50%. Quebec, you're doing amazing. But battery energy storage is one way to minimize what you're getting from the grid, and that portion from the grid which is not clean energy.
Sean, I think because it's on a timer, it's just going to go on its own for some reason. We can't figure out how to take off the timer. I think we took it off, but what slide are you on now? Yeah, and I'll just
go to the next one.
I'm so sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, that's where I am now. And then on the far right, we're talking about sustainability. So battery energy storage is a great way to help with that carbon reduction strategy. And are you going to take me to the slides? Yeah, great. So let's just talk briefly about where energy storage fits into the electricity value chain. From a generation perspective, it's that it's really important, especially when you have a grid outage scenario. The more electric capacity that's not relying on the grid, the easier it is to get the grid back online and not have that tremendous surge from all the homes hitting the grid at once. So if you're able to have your backup power off grid, that helps that black start scenario. And then also grid generation sources also have auxiliary power systems that help them get started. So battery backup is a great way to have that power available to get the plant back online. And then from a transmission and distribution perspective, that's when you're talking about substations. Those substations need power to power their systems, and that's where you're integrating renewables. And then the end users. Now, where we focus more is on the residential and commercial aspect. So where people, homes, businesses, government agencies will incorporate battery energy storage into their carbon reduction strategy to either have backup power, or with enough solar or other renewables, be independent of the grid. Or if they have excess power that they're producing, they can actually sell back, and it's a revenue generation source. Next slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this. The point here is that there are all kinds of different design factors associated with battery energy storage that come into account when you're deciding what type of storage to use, battery chemistry, what have you. And it really comes down to the voltages that you're operating at, how long you want to be able to sustain the power from the battery. Some sources allow you to get tremendous surge power, but only last a short period of time. Next slide. And then here's where you kind of see how that factors into the types of batteries that are actually being deployed. So, obviously the most prolific right now is lithium-ion batteries, and there's several different chemistries, again, depending on the characteristics in which you need to use it for. Lithium-ion is the best option if you need long duration sustained power. And then you have options like flywheels and supercapacitors that enable for you to have those short duration, high power availability from the battery. Next slide. And then we'll talk a little bit about what a solar and storage implementation looks like. This is a very, very common scenario. The International Energy Agency yesterday released its annual renewable energy market report. And they're reporting that over the past year, 2/3 of all renewables that have gone online globally is solar. And then the solar production doubled over the past year and is trending toward continue to increase, and should be way more than enough to hit the global net zero target for 2050. And so that proliferation of solar PV energy storage definitely comes with a little bit of mining. And here, so again, this scenario of solar and storage enables you to have that resiliency. It can be mobile, it could be fixed. The little drawing here on the left is a trailer. You can put solar and storage on a trailer and take it with you. We make them in the size of a box where you can carry it around, but it's enough to power the loads in your house, and all the way up to very large systems. And I'll show you some pictures of those later. Typically, it's the PV photovoltaic panels. And then MPPT is just the tech that allows you to go from the higher DC output of the solar panels down to a voltage that'll support the battery to charge. And that's all direct current. And then there's a conversion through the inverter to make it alternating current, which is the majority of the power that we use. And then the PCC is really just that point of common coupling with the grid. So that's an important touch point, and a lot needs to happen there as far as synchronization. If your power is going to feed back to the grid, you can keep that power, use it for yourself. You can push it back to the grid, or when you have excess power, there's lots of different ways to do that. And this is just a basic scenario when we're talking about solar and storage, what it looks like. There's lots of different ways to do this. I think, the early adoption of solar emphasis was getting panels, as many panels up as possible to take advantage of the sun and get us going down that path. A lot of companies, overnight went from being roofing companies to being solar companies, putting panels on roofs, but the engineering to take that and turn that into a system, there's various different capabilities. So keep that in mind. Not every solar storage implementation is going to be the same. And then you had Tesla getting into the market with their Powerwall, where they're just reusing a car battery, and a Tesla Powerwall is just a battery. So then there's all this other infrastructure that comes with it to actually turn that into usable power. And so every installation would kind of look different, and things get bolted on the wall. So the trends that you're going to be seeing, and what we try to do, is make these all-in-one systems so that they are portable, they contain everything you need, they're turnkey, very easy to operate, you can take it with you when you move. And similar configurations can be used if you're pairing solar with other renewable sources like wind power or geothermal. Next slide. And here's some examples of when we talk about energy storage. What is that? What does it look like? On the far left, you're looking at a system that has 20 kilowatt hours of storage. That's enough for a typical home to run off of for a couple of days. Again, you're implementing battery storage as part of a larger decarbonization strategy for you or your business. So the idea would be you come at it with, well, how much power do I typically use? Can I implement more efficient equipment to use less power? And then in the case of the emergency, what can I live without? And if you can really pare it down and use that power very efficiently, you can stay off the grid for quite some time. And then it scales up to these 2,000-pound systems that could be part of a data center, or a 40-foot container for an office building. But you can see that energy storage has a large footprint as you march along to more capacity and toward actual grid level usage. It gets massive. Next slide. And then just a little bit on some of the trends that you'll be seeing. You'll hear them called microgrids or nanogrids, or facility as a grid. And so that's taking that basic solar and storage configuration and incorporating other distributed energy resources. So you've got battery energy storage there paired with solar, potentially a gas generator, geothermal, wind, and that microgrid is managing those generation sources at a local, at either a building level or community level. There is connectivity to the grid, but usually you're supplying your own power. And in the case of a grid outage, you could potentially supply power back to the grid or whoever is part of your community. Lots of different things that need to be worked out for this to really evolve in the same way that the internet evolved, from local computers to subnetworks to a network of decentralized mini grids. But those are going to be some of the trends that you'll be seeing. Next slide. And here are just some ideas for additional research to think about and look into deeper. There are, with this new tech comes new standards that have to be developed, around the energy storage technology itself, around safety, around fire suppression, around cybersecurity. So a lot of things need to continue to evolve. There are some consortiums out there that are trying to implement these as open standards, which is great because, you know, as this goes the way of the internet, things will need to interconnect, and that's important. You'll see more DC-powered end-user devices pop up. That's very important because anytime that you convert from the, you know, the battery DC output or solar DC output to alternating current, there is a loss of efficiency. So DC to DC is the most efficient way to do this. And we talked about decentralization, and then improved electronic efficiencies. So that's, as I said earlier, you want to be minimizing how much power you use, especially if you need to pare down for an extended grid outage. So there's lots of technology popping up now that automatically manages that. And then with the emergence of artificial intelligence and machine learning, there's more opportunity for those systems to be even smarter. Again, that just helps with a better carbon strategy. And then the batteries will continue to evolve. Lithium is the mainstream now. A ton of money is going into trying to implement new kinds of storage technology, you know, hydrogen, aluminum-based, or flow batteries, which are silicon-based. Those are all very exciting. They all have their own unique challenges to becoming mainstream around, you know, manufacturing and scalability, but those will continue to impact the landscape. And then I talked a little bit about facility as a grid, and that is where you have your energy storage and multiple generation resources, and then you are able to, as a building, be that grid for your community. And we're excited to be working on some projects like that in the Washington, D.C. area. And those are, you know, in addition to the carbon strategies for those sustainable buildings, there's all kinds of other strategies around sustainability, you know, water treatment strategies, and lots of other carbon strategies around, again, you know, making the building as efficient and passive as possible. So, you know, improved insulation, better doors and windows, even PV facade, so that the building itself acts as a solar panel. So lots of different really cool technologies coming in line. But energy storage and solar tend to be the hardest and most expensive to implement, but typically the higher impact as far as carbon strategies go. And you know, our goal is to make it easier to implement and more affordable. So providing it at multiple levels of scale, depending on what your unique needs are. And then next slide. Feel free to ask questions in the panel, contact me afterwards. Next slide. We focus on behind the meter storage. We're a small early stage startup, but my partners are all engineers with similar backgrounds. We're happy to work with PhD students if this technology is interesting and can help you in your research needs. We'd love to work with you. Thanks.
Our next panelist is Frederic Vijan from Hydro-Québec.
I'm good. Good. Hi, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It is my pleasure to talk to you about the energy transition in Quebec from Quebec's perspective and see that they're directly linked to energy issues in terms of capacity and energy. So that will be the main focus of my presentation. My name is Fred. I'm in commercial strategy at Hydro. And so how do we drive an efficient decarbonization of Quebec? And we always put the focus at Hydro-Quebec. We always talk about efficient decarbonization as opposed to inefficient decarbonization. So we have to take into account that we have limited resources, limited capacity, limited energy on the grid. So we have to make sure that we make the best decisions to make sure that we can have the most companies and the most businesses transitioning out of energy, fossil fuels to a cleaner source of energy, a clean renewable source of energy. This is a collective commitment, and keep in mind that Hydro-Quebec, everything I will say today, always keep in mind that Hydro-Quebec is a crown company in Quebec. That means that we report directly to the government, and that means that we need to have a broader understanding of what the energy transition is all about in Quebec, and we have to always make sure that we decarbonize, thinking how do we maximize the output for the whole province, not only for one specific company or business, one specific house. We have to think at a more global scale and make sure that the choices that we're taking, those are choices that are the best for the province in the long term. I guess I pressed this button to switch to the next slide. So basically, this is the front page. I don't know if any of you in the room or online have seen this document. This is basically the decarbonization strategy of the government of Quebec. So it's just to give you a general idea of what pictures, what do we see on the picture there? This is a vision of the government of Quebec to decarbonize. I see a lot of energy used, specifically electricity. So I see EVs, electric vehicles. I see buildings, decarbonizing the heating processes. I see electric train, power lines. So basically the government plans on leveraging the province's greatest asset, which is the hydroelectricity. That's the social decision that we took in the 1970s. Quebec went towards the hydro because we had a lot of rivers. We could have gone for maybe nuclear, other sources. It just made more sense for us to dam rivers because we had a lot of access to good sites and access to a lot of water. So this is the social choice that we made in the 1970s, and it's paying off big time. Right? So the government strategy is to leverage our greatest asset to reduce GHG emissions, but also to build the economy of tomorrow. So how can we leverage our electricity so it can benefit from the economy standpoint as well? So this is the big challenge that we have. Everybody wants to come to Quebec, new businesses, new industries. We have businesses, companies already in Quebec that want to decarbonize their operation as well. So this comes to a big challenge. We made some modeling and we think that we need over 100 terawatt hour of extra clean electricity to answer those needs. Just to give you an idea, this is 50% of the capacity we have at this moment. In order to go through with the energy transition in the province of Quebec, we would need 50% more capacity, 50% more dams, 50% more transmission lines, 50% more power stations, substations, 50% more distribution lines. How do we do that? It's easy to think that we're just going to electrify the whole island of Montreal. But if I tell you we need 7 more substations, hundreds of kilometers more of transmission lines, where do you put those? Where do you find the land to build more power stations just on the island of Montreal? This comes to, and that's why energy transition can be seen as a very large-scale problem, but it comes with very operational issues. So this is it's a tall order. We're not going to lie. We want to be there. Hydro-Quebec wants to be forefront with committing to energy transition and making Quebec reach its targets. This is the call we get more and more from companies. They call us clients, our clients, they call us. And the question is not what's the rate I can have access to, what's the subsidies I can get to establish myself in Quebec. The call we get more and more from companies is they ask us, how can I reduce my carbon footprint? They know consuming green electricity will make their carbon footprint reduce. So the questions are asking to the left. So that's the client perspective on the left. Will it increase my competitiveness? That's their main goal. Do I set myself differently in my market? do I gain a competitive edge over my competition? What solutions should I consider, whether it's technology or, well, principally, mainly technology? How profitable what you're offering to me is? So those are main questions clients ask themselves. They don't really think about the capacity at Hydro-Québec and if we have, or the limited amount of energy and capacity that we have. Us, on our point, whenever we get a demand from a client, we have to ask ourselves, do I have enough energy and capacity? I'm just going to take a pause here, make sure we understand the difference between energy and capacity. We can just look at the room we're in right now. The number of people that can come into this room over 24 hours, let's say, or over 365 days. The amount of people, we're probably talking about hundreds and hundreds of people that can come through this door over a full year. This is the energy. So this is over a long period of time. Capacity is as a very specific time. I look at this room, capacity would be associated with maybe 30, 40 chairs. That's the max amount of people that can sit at the same time in this room. So we have issues on both sides. We're starting to have shortages of energy over a long period of time, and also big shortages of capacity at a given time when it's minus 30 degrees in winter, when everybody consumes at the same time. We're going to start having issues connecting to other presentations earlier. We're starting to see big issues with EV charging. People charge their car, they go back from work at 6 p.m., everybody plugs in, and that comes to a big increase on the load on the grid for us. So we have to think about how we're going to manage that extra load, and how do we make sure our, going back to resiliency, how we're going to make sure that our grid is resilient enough to sustain new technologies and to sustain new behaviors from our customers. So we're all talking about decarbonization. It's just the language is different, but we're all working towards reaching our GHG targets by 2030 in the province. So just to give you an example of how hard it is to manage capacity during peak times. So this was that's a record in terms of capacity that was set last February. So we reached a total of close to 43,000 megawatt of capacity on the grid that day. And just to give you that, the installed capacity that we have in Quebec is 37,000 megawatts. So demand was simply higher than our capacity. That's crazy when you think about it. So we have to make sure that we go on the outside markets, whether it's New England, Ontario, New Brunswick, other provinces, neighbor markets, and purchase electricity. But there's a limit to doing that strategy. At some point, it's not going to work. We need to build more capacity, but we also need people and companies to reduce their consumption. So demand has reached close to 43,000. That's a 5% increase from the previous record. That blows my mind. Why do we have such capacity issue? Because we heat buildings with electricity. I'd say it's the main advantage that we have because we decarbonize the heating systems, but at the same time, it comes to real issues for us because that shoots up the energy consumption during peak time. So half the province's electricity consumption comes from heating because 80% of homes in Quebec are heated by electricity. So those are real issues for us. At the same time, so we have issues just inside the province, just dealing with our own customers, currently fueling on fossil fuels, wanting to transition to electricity. There's another big issue. Companies outside the province, they want to come operate in the province of Quebec because they want to decarbonize also. And that's the key part of the government strategy, leverage the electricity for economic growth. And that comes to adding more pressure to the grid. And that's just to give you an example. At one point in 2023, we had about 23,000 megawatt of demand from large industry. If you remind, the installed capacity we have at this moment is 37,000. So we don't have the capacity to connect all those new demand on the grid. So we need to build more capacity. In order to do so, we also need to reduce our consumption. And that's just a quote from the Minister of Energy and Economy in the province of Quebec. The government knows that we don't have the capacity. So the government passed a bill this year in 2023, and now we're going to have to make choices. So the government will make choice between the different demands for huge blocks of electricity, and the government will attribute those blocks to the companies generating the most value for the province, whether it's jobs or money. So we have to come up with a new strategy, and we have to be selective about the projects we're going to choose to come establish themselves in Quebec. Sorry, I went too fast. So we're facing major paradigms. Our energy and capacity balances, well, they don't balance anymore. We need to build more, roll out more capacity. And at the same time, we have to make sure to make our clients understand that they have to reduce their consumption. Because when you reduce your consumption, it's like building a virtual generating station when you think about it. So for us, it comes to the cheapest way to add capacity to the grid is to make the residential sector, but also the commercial and industrial sector reduce their energy consumption, reduce their peak demand, and that's the way we build virtual generating stations when you think about it. Paradigm number 2, supply costs will go up, will shoot up. New dams that we're gonna be building in the province will be way more expensive than the ones we've built in the 1970s. So those costs will need to be internalized into rates, and then we will have to increase rates. Do we want to do that as a society in Quebec? The answer is no. The way we design grids and operation, Sean, you were talking about storage. Right now, solar storage, right now in Quebec, we don't have the infrastructure for clients to bring electricity back the other way on the grid. So we can, well, we can at some extent, but like if it comes with too much volume, it's going to be an issue for us. So we have to work on our grid. What the grid of tomorrow will look like, that's basically the project we're working on right now. And finally, well, I went over that as well. Infrastructure investments will go up, so we have to make smart decisions. Growth, basically, we need to, I'll put it simply, we need to reduce our energy consumption so we can decarbonize industries and we can electrify transportation. Let's put it that way, simple. We need energy reduction in order to decarbonize businesses, industrial processes, and also electrification of transportation. So that's where the main growth in demand is coming from. In order to do so, we're starting to work with our clients. So we bring on the table companies, financial aids, peak shaving programs, new tariffs. So we do everything we can to make the companies, or make you even at home, reduce your energy consumption. For us, it's a way to decarbonize at the lowest cost for society, because we don't want to be put in a position where we'll have to raise the rates, tariffs in the province of Quebec. For us, this is the pathway to decarbonizing your business. So we absolutely need you to consider an energy consumption reduction, and we have money on the table for that. We have financial aids, we give a lot of money, we put a lot of money on the table if you put in place energy saving initiatives. Secondly, we ask businesses, companies to strategize over their peak demand. How can you lower your demand is very important to us, because that's gonna free up capacity for us to decarbonize maybe your neighbor on the local substation. So we have to make sure companies understand that leveraging or reducing their peak demand is part of the global decarbonization strategy of Quebec, of Hydro-Quebec, but also of the province. Then, once you've reduced your consumption, once you've adopted a strategy to reduce your peak consumption, then you can think about converting to renewables. So this is the pathway we're asking companies to look at. And in some ways, we want to work in the future maybe to force companies to consider the pathways. Otherwise, you're not going to have access to the extra block of energy you're asking me. I think I'll finish on this. I think it's a very telling graphs, two very telling graphs. We are under the perception that as you electrify, your peak demand, so peak demand on the y-axis, peak demand goes up gradually, but it's not. It's not linear. At some point, we're seeing companies electrifying to 100% of their operation, but they're wasting their capacity. So they're using, so the surface area you see in orange, this is an example of a real energy profile we see in one of the clients. This client is dedicating 60% of its capacity for roughly 60 hours a year, just for peak times when it's minus 30 outside, when it's very cold in the winter. So this is capacity we cannot use at Hydro-Quebec to give to another company that wants to decarbonize. So this is the real issue that we have. We are wasting capacity. This capacity should decarbonize another business, but I cannot because I promised, contractually speaking, I promised that this company was allowed to go at that level. So we're wasting energy and we're wasting capacity, and that's where it comes to a price in terms of reaching our GHG targets. So I'm asking the question, is 100% electrification the best decarbonization solution from an environmental, social, or economical standpoints? I don't think it is. For us, we think that if we decarbonize buildings, companies at 90% and leave maybe a 10% of fossil fuels, we're in a transition after all. We think it's a strategy that generates more reduction over the whole province than decarbonizing 100% those businesses. So that's why we come up with offers. You may have heard about dual energy, electricity, natural gas in province, a joint offer from the two distributors in the province, Énergir, natural gas, and Hydro-Québec for electricity. That's why we come up with those type of offers, because we cannot allow to take the whole load from the natural gas in the province in the short term. So we have to think about energy transition for the next 15, 20, 25 years. For us, strategy at this point is making sure we have enough capacity to electrify the most businesses possible in the province. And I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It sounds like Hydro needs to talk to Sol Dunham about storage. Yeah, I know. I was like, ooh. Sorry about the technical issues because everything ran a little late. I think we'll go a bit later, if that's okay with everyone, for the discussion, just into the break a little bit, because I would like to have a longer discussion a little bit. Just to start off, I have actually a question, because after talking about car batteries in Alp's presentation, and then your batteries, how do the Sol Dunham batteries compare to like electric vehicle batteries in terms of recycling after? Because that's such a huge thing we hear about, how you can't recycle the electric car batteries. And then how also would that compare in terms of like resources, like being able to like more sustainably use resources?
Yeah, so the initially what you saw in the energy storage market were the reuse of car battery technology. And because the lithium car batteries will typically use nickel, manganese, and cobalt, it's just higher density, allows you to get more power in a smaller package, fit it into a car. So there are tons of problems with cobalt. It's a mining disaster. It's from a toxicity perspective. There's all kinds of human impact, and then recycling is an issue as well. Now, the trend for facility-based storage, especially, is going more toward lithium iron phosphate, which is what we use. So, from a mining perspective, it's safer, easy to recycle, and also is not as susceptible to the thermal runaway that you get with the typical car battery. So those require significant cooling systems, which translate into news headlines that you hear about from time to time, EVs catching fire, or these NMC-based home batteries catching fire. So the lithium iron phosphate batteries are thermally safe. They don't catch fire like that. In fact, in some cases, for example, we have a wireless broadband customer that uses our storage for solar-powered broadband wireless towers, so that in areas where there is no electric grid, they can push that wireless broadband out to rural communities. During the extreme cold, we need to actually have a heating element in the battery system to keep it warm and operate properly. So that type of battery can operate in all kinds of weather conditions, very easy to recycle, and has less of an impact as far as obtaining the resources. And the other thing that we try to do is we manufacture in the US, and for systems that we don't manufacture personally, we tend toward systems that are manufactured elsewhere in the US or in Europe. Again, when you look at your carbon footprint, the less that you're bringing in from overseas, the better. So, but you know, from a raw material perspective, when it comes to lithium batteries, we're all relying on primarily China as a source of those raw battery components. But we take the raw batteries and do most of the manufacturing, if not all the manufacturing, as locally as possible.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's one of the strategy of the government of Quebec as well. Bring as much mining of those key essential metals as well. Battery manufacturing, that's business. So we get a lot of demand from those businesses wanting to establish themselves within the province of Quebec. So,
just a follow-up question on that, if you don't mind. The common denominator is the lithium, right? NMC or LFP. What's the sentiment out there for the lithium supply for the battery?
Yeah, and again, you know, we're all relying on China way more than we would like to. So there is a ton of investment coming in to North America to have that capability to mine and process lithium here. Yeah. So that I'm very hopeful for that because not only is it a carbon footprint issue, but it is a security issue. And when it comes to especially the US grid, you know, we have major components of our grid, transformers, that are part of that Chinese logistics supply chain, which, as you saw during COVID, you know, is really problematic. And again, it's a safety issue, a security issue for us to be that reliant on getting those materials and those components from so far away.
I have so many questions, but I would love to open it up to anyone on the audience or anyone on Zoom. You can raise your virtual hand or answer it in the chat box. I'm watching. Does anyone in the audience have any questions?
Hi, thank you for all your talks, super interesting. I have a question for Sean. So you mentioned how in the States, you know, there's a lot of instances when companies go off the grid during extreme weather events or something like that. And in my own research, for example, I do research in North Carolina, and I look at the farms and what happens during like hurricanes and extreme weather events. And one of the issues is that they usually experience these secondary disasters where they're dependent on their gas generator, and then the gas generator fails. And then what happens is they're like farmed animals, the livestock end up dying like after the flood or the hurricane has happened. So I was wondering if you see farms like taking up this technology as a like a disaster management strategy, because the gas generators, like you said, like they're quite problematic in many ways.
Yeah, I think the farms are a great use case for energy storage, or if you talk about, when we talk about microgrids, because, you know, this is, I consider that critical infrastructure, and B, we're typically talking about a lot of land. And so, you know, as I showed earlier, for the panels, for the storage, you need land, and farms typically offer that. And some of the trends that we're also seeing, even in urban renewal, is combining, you know, agrivoltaics is combining the agriculture with the solar panels. So, you know, selecting those plants that can go underneath the panels. So you know, that is definitely a target market for us, and I think it's a perfect scenario to get the most out of the microgrid scenarios. Yeah.
Well, I'm out here. Does anyone else have a question here? Okay.
Hi, thanks so much for your presentation. I've got a question for the last presenter. And I was only able to come for a little bit of your presentation, but you were showing the tweet from Hydro-Quebec about how the demand for electricity was way over what you were able to provide. And I work in healthcare, and so I know that the healthcare sector is a very resource-intensive, carbon-intensive sector generally. So when demand does surpass what supply is able to provide, is there like a priority of who gets what first? And then like residential homes don't get it, but hospitals do, or like, is there a prioritization? And then my second question is, because you talked a lot about how Hydro-Quebec is incentivizing these programs, right, to try to help companies decarbonize.
Yep.
And so much of that seems more intersectoral, right? Like you can tell companies to reduce their peak hour consumption, but at the same time, if people's homes aren't properly insulated, or it seems like, you know, perhaps the programs, like, I'm just wondering if your programs are more kind of focused on this intersectoral, like housing issues, or perhaps more education campaigns, or something else. So yeah. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Okay. Going back to your first question, that's a very interesting question. So what's the sequence of, if we have more demand than capacity, does that lead to automatically to outages, and who do we take out the grid first? Luckily, we don't have to go there. Luckily, we don't have to go there. We always have the option to buy electricity on the hourly market outside the province. So mainly we purchase electricity from New England, Ontario, New Brunswick, state of New York. The thing is, we have limited interconnection capacity at the stations between the borders. So this is a strategy that's working in the short term for the next 10, 15 years, but we know in the long run it's not going to work. We're going to need more energy and capacity than what's available out there in the neighboring markets. So we need quickly to make decisions on what the next hydro projects will be in the province. This is a priority of the strategic plan that we have. Also, we have to keep working at reducing demand in the province. So for us, this is our key focus. We want to delay the moment we'll have to invest major investments on the grid. So we want to delay the moment we'll have to make those decisions. For us, the easiest way is to have the companies reducing their consumption. So luckily at this point, we don't have to put anybody in the dark. There is a hydro a plan, emergency plan in case we get there. I assure you, hospitals are on top of the list. But I don't remember, I've been a hydro for 14 years. I don't remember us ever having to use that emergency or activate that emergency plan. But there's certainly a sequence that we would have to put in place. I want to go back to maybe, if I can just add to what I said, one of the major issues we have with managing the load is how do we bring people back onto the grid after an outage? There's too much demand at the same time going on the grid when people are going back on the grid after an outage, and the wires melt. No kidding. Major issue because of that is the EV cars. Everybody's plugged in. When outages is done, when you go back on the grid, it just makes the wires melt. Can you believe that? That's just crazy to me. So we want to make sure, we want to delay the moment people or areas, neighboring cities go back onto the grid. So that's one of the projects we're working on. But we're seeing reestablishment times on the grids taking longer because we go somewhere, we do the work, we fix the issue, and then the power goes back out in the same neighborhood 20 minutes later because the demand was too high at the same time. So those are issues we have right now, very, very operational, but it's just to give you an idea. Second question, I agree with you. It's easy solution. We have the solutions in Quebec to decarbonize the economy. We are the best, one of the best places in the world to go through an energy transition. Elsewhere in the world, and that's something I should have mentioned in my presentation, but decarbonization plans or strategy elsewhere, all they think about and focus on is how I'm going to decarbonize the way I generate my electricity. We're past that point in Quebec. We're already working on the economy. Everybody is looking at us in Quebec and see if we're going to be successful with the energy transition. One of the main hurdles that we have is, I think, is literacy of our clients, people understanding that we have shortages of energy. I was referring the difference between capacity and energy early on. Not everybody can understand that. So I think for us to be more vocal about the issues that we have at managing the grid, I think would be a better way for us to engage people in understanding their roles. So we survey our clients. We try to get as most information back from our clients, and we sense that there's not a full understanding of what the issues regarding the energy sector are. So we have to work with our clients. Most of the residential clients think that they're not a solution in the decarbonization of Quebec because they're already 100% electric at home. I'd say to those customers, your role is to just reduce your energy consumption. That's the one thing you have to do, and that will allow Hydro-Quebec to decarbonize businesses and transportation.
Yeah, that makes sense. We need like better windows and stuff like that. I think that would help, right?
Those are quick wins, and we have a lot of money out there. Last point in that matter, we realized through surveys, and we survey our clients, and clients are not aware of all the money that's on the table from hydro subsidies, rates, financial aids programs. So that's one of the issues. We have to be more present in the market to be vocal about all the money that's on the table for energy saving programs.
Alex, was that you?
Thank you, everybody. It's super interesting. I have so many questions, but I'd like to hear from Mr. Bora. What makes mining sustainable? I just don't. To me, it just seems like something that's very hard to make sustainable, and I just don't really know what sustainable mining looks like.
So it's almost like an oxymoron, right? Sustainable mining, you take the metals out of it. What do you put back? So there are concepts about, in terms of sustainability, there's a soft sustainability and a hard sustainability. And it's really what we're trying to do is, this solution is, can we leverage mining to achieve our greater goals? So using the mining industry to achieve our decarbonizations, but not at all costs though. So a couple of things that we are seeing in the mining is that we also are decarbonizing mining industry, right? And a lot of electrification, and usually what we do is that we just, make the equipment, the trucks electric.
Off-road trucks, that's a big way to do it.
Yeah. Make the electric haul trucks electric, and then the grids, which is the scope 2 emissions, is that it's not hope for best, but it's kind of the first levers that make trucks electric, then try to get the electricity in either hydro or renewable energies. So right now it's how we can make mining sustainable is really two ways. Make sure that it is responsibly mined, so we are respecting the land, air, human,
pollutants,
and then we make it more sustainable in the sense that we reduce our carbon footprint. And I believe the future of mining gonna involve recycling, because it's a finite amount of resources out there, and we have to recycle, and that's the future of the mining companies I see. That's my projection, is that more and more they're going to be in the business of recycling. Yep. There's no other way. And it's not like oil and gas, right? It's not like you burn it and it's gone. We can recycle aluminum, copper. They are infinitely recyclable.
Yeah, just on a different topic, hydrogen gas storage. What are your opinions on that? I feel like I don't hear too much about it, but it seems like a really good alternative solution. And I feel like it plays into Hydro-Quebec's issues as well, of having sort of a sustainable alternative to electrification. and just how it relates, if any of you have opinions on that.
I certainly have an opinion about it. At this point, we have to be careful with hydrogen. It's energy consuming process. So basically you need 2 units of energy, of input energy, to create 1 energy unit of output. So that means we would have to invest a lot of our capacity towards generating less energy. So at this point, hydrogen is not necessarily a technology that will be implemented on a large scale in Quebec because of that, because we have to be careful where we put our electrons. But we certainly, and we have a strategy about hydrogen, there's certainly room for hydrogen at a local level if it generates jobs, economic growth in a given region in the province of Quebec. So there's place for hydrogen under certain conditions.
On that question, I want to ask, why don't we talk about nuclear? It's no carbon emissions, it's abundant power. And when we are struggling getting the electricity, Hydro One or New England, they rely on nuclear.
Yeah, that's a very good question. The social choice we made in Quebec 40, 50 years ago was to go with hydro, but at that point, everything was out there on the table. And people forget that Hydro-Quebec, we had a nuclear plant until the early 2010s, the Gentilly power plant on the close to Trois-Rivières. And thing is, I think at that point we were just swimming in surpluses of energy, and we didn't need that plant anymore. We had to major investments in that plant. We took the decision to go with other types of generation, but at this point we need every solutions that we can to roll out more renewable capacity. And I know internally at Hydro, we try to model everything we can and what's the best output in terms of investment, of output capacity, what kind of type of generation will lead us to fully complete the energy transition. So I'm not in the intimate discussions between the government and the CEO of Hydro-Quebec. But is nuclear a solution? Maybe not at a large scale as much as hydro is in the province, but can it be a solution? I guess it can, yes.
And my apologies, it was a trick question. It's not a very good political agenda either, right? I mean, if you say tomorrow that Liberal or the Conservative Party, they're gonna build a nuclear plant in Quebec, I don't know how many of you guys would vote for that, right? It's kind of a big deal, building a nuclear plant. So just like mining, we have this terrible reputation around nuclear, but it's still, in terms of decarbonization, 0 CO2. And you have an abundance of electricity, but we don't talk about it.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that too. Like socially, it's like, oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah.
And why? We have a beautiful TV show on Chernobyl on HBO and Netflix. Like we are very good with the negative PR, right? But
it marks the imaginary for sure. Off-grid generation is going to be a solution for mining. When you think about mining sites, they're far, and it's very costly for us, Hydro-Quebec, to connect those sites to the grid, because we're talking maybe a power line of several hundreds of kilometers just for one mining site. So for those sites, it makes sense to look at off-grid generation solutions, just as a solar, build their own solar park, wind farm, small hydro, so it makes sense for them to decarbonize that way, consider other technologies and solutions.
I think we have another question here.
Thanks for all speakers, the good speeches. And my question is quite general. So how you guys evaluate the potential of using biomass energy? Because it's quite recyclable and not really decarbonize, but it absorb carbon and release it again. It's on an annual basis. Quite personally, I think it's have good potential. How you guys evaluate that? Thanks.
Well, we certainly like biomass energy. Anything that can be used during peak hours, we're gonna like. So this is a source of generation that's promising. There's a lot of volume. But I think you have to use it locally. You have to make sure that you make good decisions. if you look at the carbon footprint of biomass, is it really environmentally friendly if you generate the biomass, then transport it over hundreds of kilometers at the consumption site? I'm not sure it is. So I'd say in certain regions of Quebec, and we're lucky that we have a lot of forests, locally, if you generate the biomass and use it at a local stage, certainly can be very beneficial. So biomass for us, again, we want to see more dual energy out there. And dual energy can be with renewable natural gas, or it can be with biomass. As long as we offer a clean, renewable solution package to the client, we're going to be out there saying it's a good solution. Yeah.
Okay, we have another online question from Meredith. It's about the concern for electric vehicles. If they are used for peak times, so does Hydro-Québec advocate for supports or funding for better electric public transit infrastructure, or wouldn't the prioritization for the public transit for it may be successful in ensuring energy capacity than individual electric vehicles?
Yeah, absolutely. We advocate for more fundings in terms of public transportation. You have to understand, in Quebec, this is led by the government. Hydro-Québec will not come out with a financial aid for public transportation, but we have experts, and we've putting new offers, products to accompany those bus companies or other fleet vehicle companies that want to electrify their fleet. We have services out there to manage their load and help them to manage their charging times and stuff. So we have the expertise to accompany those businesses with that expertise. One thing I will say about the electrification of transportation, it's funny to me because when you look at sales of EVs over the last year, most sales were in the SUV category. So we're thinking that we're decarbonizing the right way by electrifying transportation, but the size of vehicles is going up. So electric vehicles are consuming more electricity than they should. So and so if we adopt in Quebec a strategy of replacing one diesel, one gas car by a one-by-one transition to electric car, I'm not sure it's the right way to do it. We have to look at, again, energy saving. We have to reduce consumption from vehicles before converting to electricity. So make sure that maybe why don't you have a single car at home instead of 2 or 3? Do you really need the newest SUV out there on the market, or can you lower the size of your vehicle? So those are issues, those are societal issues. So we have to deal with them at that stage as well. But we do advocate for more funding in the public transportation for sure.
Definitely, thank you. And I myself have a question. I wonder if you do any measurement for dams that you are using for the hydroelectric, because there are some issues with the temperature difference due to natural water flow, or some issues for wildlife, fishes. Do you do any measurements to make it more sustainable?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we're cited as, so basically whenever you build a new dam, you have to go through a very rigorous environmental process to get all your permit. Like permitting is very, it's very important in the Quebec law, under the Quebec law. So we have to make sure that we manage impacts on the environment. We have to make measures, lots of studies over 20 plus years. So it's a very rigorous process. So we do a lot of those measurements, and we make sure that whenever we build new dams, that we don't damage the environment. This is very, and this is in the core values of Hydro-Québec. There's lots around the permitting in Quebec, lots of laws. Quebec is one of the places in the world that gives a more importance to those issues. And I want to say that just recently, this month, we're completing and certifying some of our dams up north with an International Hydropower Association certification, assessing that we are managing, that we have built and managing those dams in a very sustainable way. So we are the first utility in the world to have our dams certified under that certification. So we manage our impacts in a very good way.
Awesome. We are very lucky that we live in Quebec. Yeah. And one question for Alp. I wonder how can we raise the social awareness for mining? Because as you mentioned, mining is everything, and there's a wrong mindset about mining that it's dirty and it can't be sustainable. Like the Pepsi can you show, but maybe a few people just go through it and scan the code. So what can we do to evade the social, especially the kids that are future generation, or even the companies, government, because now most of the companies are investing in electrical vehicles, and they are investing for lithium mining. So what measures or what steps can be done to make them available to make even mining, the source of it, more sustainable?
Absolutely. So there are a couple of things that needs to be done. In terms of PR, we're not very good at that. And I took the example of nuclear, for example. You know, it's a lot of energy. It's clean, etc. But we have a terrible public perception of it. We got the same problem with the mining. When I say mining, you're the root of all evil, right? Or you're the bad guy. And I love talking with the NGOs about that, by the way. Like, it's just great to get their perspective on that, that their perception. So we have this generational narrative that we gotta change. You look at the Avatar. Who are the bad guys? The mining companies. You look at I don't know, Snow White and the dwarfs. What I do, still picks on. This is the imagination of the mining we have right now, which we are using the best of the best technologies out there. And we always said, oh, mining is dangerous. I've been working for 12 years in mining. In Canada right now, with all the legislation we put in place, it is not, it is hazardous, like anything else, but I don't say it is dangerous. So we have a job to do to change the narrative. A couple of things can be done for this. The first is, people like me, we come out, go to universities, speak to the younger generation to say that, hey guys, this is what mining is, and this is why we do what we do and how we do it and why it matters. The purpose, it's really, we're not good at communicating the purpose. Within the mining, we know this. As soon as you get outside the mining bubble, nobody knows about it. So the companies, we should be a little bit more bold, telling our purpose to general public. On the other side is to change this narrative. There are a couple initiatives that we started with my companies, that the children's books about, again, going back to that purpose, how it's an open pit mining operations really work. What kind of technologies do we use? What do we extract out of the ground? Copper, let's say, and where the copper or bauxite or nickel is used in our lives. So there are two ways we need to do within the industry, that we tell the general public our purpose, but also we gotta re-educate or reform our education system around this extractive industry. And I don't like comparing us to oil and gas, because I don't think it's very comparable. It's for decarbonization, to build everything as we know, we need mining, and that is not going anywhere.
Exactly. Thank you.
Sure.
We better wrap up. I know we could ask like a million more questions, and I have more questions, but we really should wrap this up because we have the next session that we're already late for. So if you need to run to the washroom or anything, do it now, because we're going to start in a few minutes with the next session. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists, as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us until now, so far. Now we are going to start our PhD presenter first session, and it's on carbon sequestration issue. Our first presenter is Ebenezer Esilifié. Please forgive me for mispronounce. From Lakehead University. I think we have this presenter online. Can I see you?
Is that Ebenezer?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if I can turn. You want to see my
Yeah, share your screen for the
Okay.
please.
Yeah. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah. Thank you. You have 5 minutes, and after you, the other presenter will present their presentation. And finally, we will have question and answer part. So attendees in person or Zoomers, you can ask your question on that part. Zoomers, you can just put your question on chat or raise your hand. I'm watching that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is my audio okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My name is Ebenezer Isilfi. I am from Lakehead University. I'm a PhD student, and today I'll present to you on the application of lignin as a green alternative reagent in mineral processing. So one of the speakers in the previous session talked about mining and sustainable mining and decarbonizing the mining industry. So mineral processing is one of the important aspects of mining. It is the separation of valuable minerals from unwanted gangs in an ore. An ore is just a rock that contains metal values that can be mined economically. The end goal is to produce valuable metal commodities that can be used for various uses, that can be applied for various uses. So the chart you see on the right here is just an overview of mineral processing for those of us who don't know much about it. This is an ore stockpile. Can you see the cursor?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is an ore stockpile. This is basically rocks that contain valuable metals like nickel, copper, platinum, gold, etc. And these are locked inside the rocks. And so the objective is to be able to recover these metals and produce bars out of them. So the rock goes through several processes to be able to achieve these products. The first stage is called crushing, where an equipment that we call crusher crushes the rocks to smaller sizes. And then from there, it goes to another equipment that we call grinding mill. The grinding mill further grinds the rocks to be able to achieve finer particle sizes, usually between 50 to 60 microns. So it's crushed from 200 millimeters, for example, to about 50 to 60 microns. What you see here is called a cyclone. A cyclone just separates the coarser particles from the finer particles so that the coarser particles will go back to the mill, while the finer particles go to the next process that we call flotation. Now, flotation is just the separation of the valuable minerals from the unwanted minerals using chemicals and air bubbles. Now, at the end of the day, what we want to achieve with the flotation is to produce a final concentrate. It goes through a thickener, a filter, and then we produce a concentrate, which has the valuable metals, but in the form of particles. And then what advances to the next stage down here is the tailings. Tailings is just the total unwanted material that you couldn't collect from the flotation circuit. That also goes to a thickener. And what the thickener does is just to separate the solid particles from the water so that the water can be treated in a clarifier and recycled for use in the process. This is dried and sent to the tailings because it has no value to it. Now, the concentrate is what contains the metal value. So they are trucked to a smelter, and then they are refined to produce the gold bars that you see, the copper, nickel, and you can use this for various applications. Now, for the purpose of this work or this presentation, our focus is going to be on two things. But you can see that or I would let you know that there's lots of chemicals that we use in the process. So we use dust suppressant in the ore stockpile and crusher circuit. We use lots of chemicals in the flotation circuit as well as the thickener. We use a lot more chemicals in the, again, the thickening circuit and then the clarifier. Then a lot more is used in the smelter. So there's lots of chemicals that are used. For the purpose of this presentation, our focus is going to be on the flotation, which is this one here. In flotation, we use chemicals like collectors, depressants, and frothers. And then the second point of focus is the dewatering, which is a thickener or a clarifier, which are these ones. So here we use chemicals called coagulants and flocculant. I'm not going to bore you with all the chemistry behind these chemicals, but the challenge that we have here is that these chemicals are expensive, that's one. And part of the reason why they're expensive is that in Canada, we buy these chemicals from out of country. So some of these chemicals come from the Philippines, from Finland, from Russia, the States. And so they travel through long distance before they reach the mining companies here in Canada. Now, what happens is that we are actually expanding our carbon footprints because of the transportation, long distance transportation. And that is what we are trying to avoid. The second thing is these chemicals are oil-based. They are oil-based, which defeats the purpose of our clean energy transition. We talked about sustainable mining in the previous session. This is one area that we can look at if we want to have a sustainable mining industry. Instead of oil-based, can we use any other raw materials? And also because of the clean energy transition, it is expected that the production of metals such as copper and nickel, lithium, etc., are going to be on a high demand. If they are going to be on a high demand, it presupposes that the chemicals that are used in making or producing these metals are also going to be in high demand. Unfortunately, these are oil-based chemicals. So what can we do about it? Is the question that we all have to answer. If we want to make a switch to clean energy, but the metals that are being produced to service the clean energy is oil-based, then it kind of defeats the purpose. So as researchers, we are looking at alternative raw materials for producing these metals. So what if we can make the production of these chemicals more sustainable by making them from trees? We could at least partly make the production of these chemicals sustainable, if not 100%, by using the materials that we have in abundance. So there is a material called lignin, which is found in trees. And in the production of cellulose fibers, lignin is separated and usually burned for energy. However, this is the second most abundant biopolymer that we have. It is said that lignin is about 30% of the total biomass that we have. So it's definitely in abundance. So we can put it to good use. It's also relatively easy to process. And we have startup companies like LignoBoost and LignoForce that are trying to use lignin for various applications. Another good thing about the lignin is that you can modify it for specific applications. Like you can use it for different applications by modifying it. You can see this is the structure of lignin. It's very heterogeneous and the functional groups are multiple, so you can based on the application, you can modify it and use it for whatever purpose you intend it for. This is just showing that that's how we get lignin from a tree. Because it's in abundance, we should make good use of it. Now, what we have seen in our labs, or in our lab, what we have done is that we extracted lignin and we're able to modify the lignin with another polymer called METAC under various conditions. I won't bore you with all the chemistry behind it, but we're able to produce a lignin-based flocculant. Flocculant is just a chemical that is used in water treatment to separate water from solid particles. And we're able to use this to separate. This is a mine wastewater that has particles, like very fine particles in it. And you can see that it's very murky. With the introduction of lignin-based flocculant, we're able to make it as clear as you can see here, with all the solid particles settling at the bottom. Now, the graph you see here on the right, it just talks about turbidity. Turbidity is how clear your water is. So you want the turbidity of your water to be as low as possible. And when the lignin-based flocculant was used, we could see that with the lignin alone, it didn't do much. It was still high, but when the lignin was modified, or when the PMETAC, which is a commercial product, was modified with lignin, we're able to reduce the turbidity as compared to when just the PMETAC was used. So it means that lignin actually improved the turbidity of the water, which makes it applicable in mineral processing, because that's what we want to achieve at the end of the day, so that we can reuse the water. And this is just one example of what lignin can do as far as mineral processing. And we are also researching on the use of lignin for flotation. I do not have results. That's why that part is not here, but we are seeing some significant potential for lignin application in mineral processing, and more work is needed to be done. So the next time we have this meeting, I'm sure I'll have more results for lignin application in fraud flotation as well. But this is a good indication that there is a huge potential for lignin application in mineral processing to, one, reduce our carbon footprint, and to enhance the mineral industry as far as sustainable mining is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ebenezer, for your informative presentation. Our next presenter is Hang-Seong Seong from University du Québec à Montréal.
Testing. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for hosting this event. And show my, today I'm going to talk a little bit about agriculture greenhouse gas emission. Agriculture has been long neglected by this event until now. Thanks for my present. And the topic is about the rice-based nitrous oxide emission. Nitrous oxide, N2O, is one of the most important greenhouse gas, with probably the strongest global warming potential, which is about 300 times larger than that of carbon dioxide. So it's a big dude, and we have to deal with it. Thanks. And as for the topic here, rice, it's also a very important food crop that's sustaining large population, especially in Asia, for Asian people and Africa. And known as a methane source, well, in fact, rice paddy also produce N2O. Especially when we try to reduce the production of methane. There's a very not new, but widely used approach called intermittent flooding transforming from continuous flooding, which means we have a short period of time of drainage called mid-season drainage to let the soil breathe and reduce methane. But at this very time, the N2O will be produced because the oxy condition favors the activity of nitrification and the incomplete denitrification and produce the strongest greenhouse gas N2O. There's a huge debate that either the transformation from continuous to intermittent flooding contribute mostly to N2O emission from rice, or it's from nitrogen fertilizer, because it's very easy to follow that it's a nitrogen trace gas. The reason for this great debate is because insufficient model estimation. Current existing field observations are only site level. It cannot cover all the globe, which means their representativity is not acceptable. And existing models are oversimplified to incorporate major informations like crop, calendar, and specific management practices. So in this study, we try to improve a model and better estimate the magnitude and source of N2O emission from global agriculture ecosystem. So it's not working, please. Next slide. So here's our model named Triple-X greenhouse gas model. It's a process-based biogeochemical model, and we incorporate major microbial activities and agriculture management and crop growth module into an original model structure. This model is quite complicated, including all the ecosystem components. And for this part, the most important is definitely the N2O module and soil biogeochemical module, which simulates the dynamics of nitrogen and carbon cycles in our ecosystem. For this case, rice-based ecosystem. Sorry, next slide, please. Sorry, previous one. No, previous one, sorry. This one, yes. So after the model development, we validate our model, right? It's a process. And as you can see that our model performed quite well on daily time step for the left-hand side. The 4 continuous measurement of N2O emission suggests that our model have very great agreement with the observation data on a daily time step. On the right-hand side, on the global scale, we can find that the cumulative emission of N2O also simulated reasonably compared with our model estimation. So all in all, we have believed that our improved Triple-X greenhouse gas model is a reliable tool in simulating the dynamics of rice-based N2O emission. Next slide, please. And we conduct global simulations to estimate the N2O rice-based N2O emission since 1910 to 2020. And with the simulations was conducted in spatial resolution 0.5 degree. And we found generally a strong spatial variation pattern for the N2O emission from rice-based ecosystem. And apparently Asia contributes most to the global emission, which accounts for about 80% of total emission since the last century. Next slide, please. As for temporal variation, we found a continuous increasing trend of overall rice N2O emission. And when we try to decompose them into different driving factors, we found that the nitrogen fertilizer application, the red color column, is the largest source of N2O emission, while compared with the expansion of irrigation from continuous to intermittent flooding, which is the light blue column. It's only a minor contribution to total emission. So that's gave our conclusion that the nitrogen fertilizer is still the most important source and contributor to rice-based N2O. More interestingly, we try to estimate without nitrogen fertilizer, is there any chance that the expansion of irrigation can contribute to N2O? Well, the fact is in the right line there. It's just that without fertilizer application, the contribution of irrigation has very limited contribution to the total N2O emission. That gave us a clue that to solve that great debate that the change of irrigation is just a trigger to induce the N2O emission rather than the fundamental reason that generates the N2O. And this whole process is still a nitrogen limited process. To responsible for the overall processes. To conclude, the significance of the co-management of both nitrogen fertilizer and water regime is recommended to reduce the N2O emission from global agriculture ecosystem. Next slide, please. Thanks. So that will be all my presentation, and based on the requirement, we have to show some cooperation opportunity. Our model XXX model family has evolved since last 2 decades, since XXX to now XXX GHG version 2. And current XXX model is capable of simulating the dynamics of carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide emission, and methane emission of all major GHG from terrestrial ecosystem soils. The spatial scale can vary from site level to the global level. And our model has been already involved in the global budget of methane and N2O. So it's quite useful, and if you guys have an interest, let me know, and we are happy to take any questions for the next few minutes. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Hansun. And our next presenter is Kulsum Fatime from University of Calgary.
Good afternoon, if everybody can hear me clearly. Okay, great. So what I'm presenting today is, as you can see on the slide, it's examining the place-based interventions for water sustainability performance. And I guess before starting on with my presentation, I would rather like to share a small piece of experience that I had today when I came in to join this symposium. And along with my friend who's right there sitting in the light green color, we took a little explorative tour to find out the washroom and the water fountain locations. And I think it's not available on this particular floor, so we have to find it and reach all the way and go to the 3rd floor. And I think that's precisely what my entire presentation today is. And what I'm going to present is a part of my research, and it's one of the chapters where I'm trying to work towards the water literacy framework, wherein we are just trying to, just encourage people and communities who are using these spaces and these amenities, especially with respect to water, to have more ease and flexibility and, at the same time, accessibility when it comes to these, resources or these design elements and everything else. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is just to give you a background that essentially the entire research aims to improve the accessibility and bring visibility to the existing water sustainability initiatives on the UCalgary campus. And why essentially UCalgary campus? Because as per the studies and the research that is available, UCalgary is one of the, it is actually the 2nd largest LEED certified campus in Canada. And when it comes to green buildings, SDG 6 initiatives, and implementing water sustainability, saving water resource, and a lot of other terminologies and a lot of other efforts that we are looking in and we are trying to work towards, this definitely makes a lot more sense to me, because with LEED certification, buildings or your spaces comes with a guaranteed performance benchmark, and that's essentially the reason why I intended to take the LEED certified buildings. And at the same time, I am also investigating the LEED induced, LEED induced points of attractions that could support an individual consumption or, support an individual awareness when it comes to sustainability. And in here, I'm trying to present today user-oriented mediated communication strategies that will enhance user observation and perception around these existing water features as we move through our campus. And in this case, it is my campus, which is UCalgary. Thank you. So for this particular presentation, the study objectives or the overview would be to present 3 stages of recording community perspectives and expectations on water sustainability. And this all is part of the water literacy framework, which is a part of my main research. So the first section is to evaluate the existing scenario. So just to see around and see what all exists and how it is being perceived and how effective it is. And that is being done using a pre-assessment survey that was last year, April 2022. Based on the responses that I could receive, I did some the mediated communications interventions just to enhance the visibility and to make things more obvious and more, with more information. And for doing that, I choose the physical as well as the digital spaces. And then finally, I try to measure these interventions and see how the community has to respond, or how the community receive these interventions. And if we can move to the next slide, please. Yeah, and this is the overall methodology, wherein the first step was to see what we think as we move through our own campus. And when I say when we move through our own campus, it is both ways, like digitally and physically. So physically, we have these landscape spaces and your physical presence. And digitally, we have these websites and the other student clubs and everything else. And then what I tried to do is, in the first part, which is to evaluate the existing scenario, I did some interviews and I tried to investigate what people have as part of the lived experiences with water on campus, and then to identify what are their top 5 reasons which make them commit more towards water conservation or to be a better user when it comes to water usage. And based on that, I did prepare, it's a chord diagram, and if this can work on the previous slide. Yeah. Oh, it's not working. Okay, so that's fine. Let's just go back. Yeah. So it's basically a chord diagram, and it connects the top 5 reasons with the topmost, favorite water features on campus, and it just runs. And I'm not sure why it is not working right now, but it's more of an animated image. And then moving forward, based on this analysis, I did the proposal, and I still need the previous slide. Thank you. And then I moved on to the MCT interventions, and then the final step was the post-assessment survey. Next slide, please. Right, so in the pre-assessment survey, this was this was completed in April 2022. I have categorized, I have these 6 major categories to see what would be what already exists on campus. And in here, you can see that I investigated the permanent informational signages, interactive campus map, movable educational posters, which would be something similar to what we can see here as the SDG grid. And then we have this water use data monitoring and tracking display for the real-time tracking for water consumption. And then we have a set of MCTs under the on-campus events promoting water sustainability, and then trying to highlight water design elements in campus landscape. And this was the result. And in here, the most preferred or most easily perceived, and also to say the most favorite, were the informational signages among the community that I come from. And next to that is the educational posters and the events, and then we have the interactive campus map. Next slide, please. And then these are the 6 strategies that I designed and implemented. And at the same time, all these 6 strategies goes into the post-assessment part of the survey or the study. But because of the time constraint, I'm only presenting the 4th strategy, which is an interactive campus sustainability map. And I should rather call it like water sustainability map, because it gives you all the information about water, including the water fountain locations, all the green certified buildings which are running and claim to be water efficient, and all the outdoor landscape locations where there is storm infiltration. And it actually becomes a very active site, especially during the rainy season, because then you can actually see the rainwater falling, moving through the ground and getting collected and all that process. And this was something I did as a part of the pre-assessment survey. So I presented the community with map A, which was more of a static map, which is already existing. And then I created a map B, which is more of an interactive map, which gives you a real-time, data as well as the directions. And since it was approved last year, it now sits on the main website of the University of Calgary Water Sustainability page. And I would like you to take maybe 30 seconds to just scan the code and experience this map yourself. And I know this will help me get more questions from the audience. Yep. Okay. So we can move on. Yeah. Oh, it should be working, but I'll provide you with or maybe I just check with what is the technical issue in there. But based on that, I proposed these 6 strategies and I presented it as part of the experiential learning workshops and the other sustainability events during the past 1 year on campus. And then based on these workshops and events, I again went back to the community and did a survey and asked them to rank it. And then again, as you can see, it was more to do with the permanent signages and then followed by the educational posters. And surprisingly, this time the interactive campus map comes, it gains better, acceptability. Right now it's like around 25%. And then the water data monitoring is, I think, something which is least perceived as of now. And this is a kind of a area of intervention that I still need to work more in terms of, raising awareness and knowledge in the area. And based on that, these are the findings. So when I presented all of that, and then I asked people, this was essentially the part of the experiential learning workshop. And I asked people which particular strategy helped them gain what. And with what, there were like 4 categories: whether they do not find them effective at all. Second, if at all this makes them curious to learn more or get engaged. And the third would be if any of the strategy or a particular strategy motivates them to actively engage with water sustainability initiatives. And then lastly, if seeing this strategy or experiencing that strategy would make them feel more committed. And these are the results where in the Windows learning graphic is something that is making people more curious. And then the interactive campus map makes people feel more motivated. And at the same time, the water bottle refilling station, there's an infographic that I designed next to the water bottle refilling station, which gives them a QR code and the ability to scan and see what is the source of water, how it is coming, how it is getting treated, what is the role of city, how the campus facilities are dealing with the water resource, and all that. And I think that gets the maximum likes, and it's like almost 27%, wherein for the bottle refilling station. And I think I have the next highest for the interactive campus map, which unfortunately is not working at the moment. But I'll definitely like to share the link so that you can experience it firsthand. And then coming back for a comparative analysis, what make people feel more committed or more motivated? So for the pre-assessment survey, I could see that the reason for action accountability. So for example, if I give you an example, so action accountability would be something like if I go to fill my own water bottle and the water bottle refilling station tell me the number of plastic bottle that I'm going to save if I'm using that particular bottle refilling station. And that's something to do with the action accountability. So it certainly is the maximum, whether it is pre-assessment or the post-assessment. The only thing that is essential from my research is to see the variation in the next 4 aspects, which is like feelings, like any feeling which comes naturally as a part of a physical setting. Then individual concerns, for example, like I interviewed one person who mentioned that because of the COVID thing, he eventually started liking the automatic water taps. Otherwise, he had never noticed them before. So those kind of things falls under the individual concerns. And then there's a section with mental clarity and the sense of place. And in both of these cases, it is more to do with the understanding of a long-term or more of a futuristic scenario. So for example, if I'm saving one plastic bottle today, how it is going to affect the landfill in the next 20 years. So that kind of a understanding and information that the responses have provided to me is help me divide them in mental clarity and the sense of the place. Yeah, and this is just a word cloud that I tried to do, and this was very helpful for me to see why action accountability is the most dominant reason that help people encourage or indulge in water conservative practices. And the next most dominant reason was feelings. So within feeling, people have to say that they like to be connected with nature, aesthetics, movement, peace, and things which are attractive to them, things which are encouraging to them. And under the action analysis, it's more like reducing plastic waste, convenience, refilling, access, creating, encouraging, and saving, and a lot of words in there. And that's just to give an understanding. And I use this particular slide during my experiential learning workshops, because at that point of time, I needed to reach out to a larger community. And yeah, this is, again, a very short learning activity as part of my presentation, because I'm more focused on the experiential learning part. So this is just to evaluate our own reasons for water conserving behavior. And it's, again, the same process that I've used in my research. And it will help you answer what features we see on our campus, which one is our favorite, and why it is our favorite. And I think with that, I guess it's the end of my presentation. Yeah, and I'm open to questions. And if you have time, just scan the code, feel it yourself, and just immerse in that experience that I have been living through for the last 2 years. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Awesome. We have last presenter, Neil Patel. I'm not sure if he's or she's here in person or online. If not, okay, we can proceed with question and answer. Attendees, do you have any question? Just raise your hand, or even Zoomers, you can put it in chat or raise your hand. Thank you.
Thank you. So about nitrogen and basically measuring the output from a field, I was wondering, so you talked about basically evaluating your model and how it compares to reality. I was wondering how those measurements are actually taken from the field. Like, how do you know how much methane or N2O actually comes from a field? Maybe you can elaborate on that. And then I have actually one more question.
Thanks, man. Yeah, the measurement of those gas emissions is quite important and fundamental to our model development. For the measurement, there are two major approaches. First one is called static chamber. It's basically a box that implant in the field, and we can manually drain some gas from there from time to time and measure the concentration gradient so that we can get a rate of the changes of a gas concentration so that we have a flux. Another approach now, which is more representative, is called eddy covariance, which can cover a larger terrestrial area from maybe in a diameter of like 10 kilometers, something like that. This basically can cover not only the soil, but also the vegetation source of or sink of gas. So there's two major approaches. But still, for my research now, mostly use the static chamber result, because even though it covers small land area, but still very representative, because it covers both small-scale soils and the plants. Those two, yeah. And another approach is called concentration gradient, which means to directly measure the change of gas concentrations in the soil column. It's kind of direct, but not that widely used, so I'll just skip that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. That's clear. And then I guess my second question had to do with resolution. You talked about how I think you have 0.5 degrees kind of spatial resolution.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, okay, so number one, how does that correspond to like spatial resolution in terms of meters, like actual distance or actual area? And then how important is resolution in terms of, getting an accurate representation? Like, is the resolution not something your system is very sensitive to, or is it actually quite important?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, you are expert. And the first question is that the spatial resolution is 0.5 degree. That means we have a 0.5 degree latitude times 0.5 degree longitude grid cell that we use. And because our planet is not a regular ball, it's basically like this kind of shape. So in the I'm not sure the in or on in the how I say that equator. When I have equator, the 0.5 degrees is about 50 kilometers per grade. So that's an answer. But if we go like in here in Quebec, it's probably about just 45 kilometers per 0.5 degree. That's about answer to the first question. And next, it's about how it's important. It's more than important than everything. It's more important than everything. Actually, it's because you guys may thought that 0.5 degrees is quite coarse. It's not fine enough, but in reality, we have to use different climate data, soil data, and vegetation data to drive the model. We have some stations from here to there, but those stations cannot cover every inch of our soil. So basically, those data is from satellite data and airplane data, and some from Google Earth Engine, if you guys know that. Those data, 0.5 degree now is quite acceptable. Now we have like 5 Arcmin. I'm not sure you guys familiar with that unit. But still the resolution, because we have difficult time to calibrate and validate the data accuracy in a finer resolution. But 0.5 degrees is quite good. If you look at the historical climate data that I used, they have very good correlation between the site observation result and the daily estimation by those from those database, which was produced by models instead of all from observations. So the 0.5 degree now is okay, but we are trying to get a finer resolution. And more important thing is that if we try to estimate to predict the future scenarios, their resolution is more, it's closer. It's like 1 degree maximum. So it's give us some trap to give a better and more reliable estimation for the global stuff.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for wonderful presentations. I have 1 or 2 questions, Kalsum. I know you have done more. I'm a little bit familiar with your research, wonderful research about water. I was wondering about if you can elaborate a little bit about the interviewees, that in terms of the number as a targeted group, and is your research replicable? And let's say, how did you categorize or control those interviewees in terms of number, gender, or any specific groups if you had? And also, if you can elaborate a little bit also about the 5 strategies, that it was from your literature review, or I didn't get that part too. Thank you so much.
Is it better now? Okay. So just going, I guess I'll take the first question first. So for the people who were involved in this, the post-assessment responses that were there, so I had approached the data collection in two separate ways. So one is a survey that was easily available to anyone and everyone, and that was a part of the different newsletters and the web channel and all the digital mediums that I have. And apart from that, what I tried to do is to conduct a set of 4 experiential learning workshops, which were more like an in-person interaction. And the purpose to do that was to give them a better understanding of, what is the background and what is it that they are expected when they are going to respond or take that survey. And at the same time, just to give them a little more information about what exactly is SDG 6, what is water sustainability, why we are even addressing them. And that was almost like a 50-minute workshop that I did with a set of selected people. And obviously, I would like to mention that for this particular study, it was more like an anonymous data collection. So there's no, there wasn't any requirement for any, gender or any identifiable data was not collected during the study. So the information was easily available for anyone who would like to join or, like to learn more. And since you are from my own university, so I can just give you the better detail that I reached out to the Office of Sustainability, especially because I knew that they must have a group of people who have similar interest and they might be interested in the research. And then at the same time, I tried to reach out to the resources like the residences on campus, because there we have a lot of people who are in residence and who are experiencing campus better than the day people who are coming in or moving out. And then, as I said, it was openly available to everybody else, so whosoever was interested. And other than that, I did a workshop with Office of Sustainability, the on-campus residences, and then with our own SAPL, which is the architecture community in our own faculty. And then I also did one with the Student Engagement Office, and that was essentially to have the participation from the undergraduate students as well, because with Office of Sustainability and all these places, it's more of a graduate concentration. So that was a part of the strategy. And I think based on the responses, like what I got from the independent surveys is almost like 2,000 responses that I have received. And in the experiential learning workshops, I think I have almost like 300 participants, like combining all the workshops that I had. And at the same time, I also try to utilize like such events where in our case, we have the Peer Beyond Research Conference. So I presented in there, and whosoever was interested, they contacted me and they were willing to participate, and that's how I got my own participants. So that is just to answer your first question. And the second question, I think it was about how I identify the strategies. So I started with a very, something which was available as part of literature. And then I tried using my pre-assessment survey and just verified if that is actually working. And at the same time, I also, cross-checked if that particular strategy is existing on my campus. So for what was available and what I can see and experience myself is a part of the research. Because frankly speaking, I can only improvise, like design-wise, on a strategy which is actually existing. So for example, just to mention, the water data monitoring is not very actively pursued in my campus as of now. So that's something that we are working towards. And I think that is also one of the reasons that the respondents have, ranked it as the least, a perceivable strategy on campus compared to everything else. So I think it's more like, what you see is what you believe. So yes, most of the strategies are what is already existing. And the ones that I've seen at other campuses like UBC and the Georgia Tech campus in Atlanta, and I have a couple more living building like campuses which have these living building certified buildings existing on their campus. So they're using a number of strategies which are like quite different from what I've presented today. But for the scope of my research, I'm restricting to what actually exists on my own campus. And I'm happy to answer more of your questions.
So much for our PhD presenters for the presentation. All of them were really interesting. We have a lot of questions. I know I myself have a lot of questions, but we ran out of time. So join us for a lunch, and then we will come back for another session for energy transition at 1 o'clock. Enjoy it. Thank you. We are going to start our new session on energy transition. We have our presenter, PhD presenter online, Alex Dandridge. Please forgive me for mispronunciation your name. From University of New Brunswick. Alex, you can go ahead.
Okay. You can see my slides and hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Alex Dandridge. I'm an interdisciplinary PhD student at the University of New Brunswick. Today I'm presenting a research paper in progress entitled Fitting Business Models in Socio-Technical Transitions. So as a graduate research assistant, I led a market research study on utility energy efficiency programs, and I found that programs varied significantly between utilities, and I thought the concept of business models might help to explain these differences. So energy efficiency programs secure energy savings through strategies like home audits and retrofits, and they're generally delivered by utilities. They attempt to reduce the energy efficiency gap, which exists in part due to barriers to adoption. And my research sought to understand how utility programs address these barriers. I also looked at business models. So business models describe the rationale of how an organization creates, delivers, and captures value. And the traditional utility business model is designed to deliver cheap and reliable power to one large customer segment at one rate. I also considered the multi-level perspective of the socio-technical system. So the MLP describes the phases and levels through which technological innovations progress. And the concept is useful for this research because it considers technology within the transition, such as smart home products, but also societal functions like consumers' willingness to actually use this technology in their home. So this review identified a lack of research about the business models of utilities that both sell electric power and deliver energy efficiency services. And it also remains unclear how we can conceptualize business models within the MLP. So my data collection included 15 semi-structured interviews with utility program managers in Canada and the US. And I applied a semi-inductive method and coded my interviews using Business Model Canvas. So this is a tool to formalize business strategy. It includes 9 blocks defining different areas of business, and I focused on the 4 highlighted here. So while I coded to all 4 blocks, key partners most differentiated the utility business models, and 3 distinct segments of key partners emerged. So first and most common were traditional partners, including governments, trade allies, and other utilities. Next were new players. These organizations also work to progress energy efficiency goals, but bring a new approach or product to the market. And it includes efficiency organizations, energy efficiency products, supply chain, and software as a service providers. And then the final group is actors in non-energy industries. So this group does not directly work within the energy sector, but they are stakeholders in the future of energy efficiency. They included schools, industry groups, realtors, and builders. So to conceptualize the way utilities worked in these 3 groups, I stacked them in these 3 rings here in what I called a key partner canvas. And the idea is that the utility is in the middle, and then each ring acts as a level the utility may reach. So circling back, my first research question asked how the business models of these electric utilities differed. And driven by partnerships, I found 3 distinct business models. So the first were niche dwellers. These utilities had few traditional partnerships. They often had fewer resources as well, and a smaller community, and they focused on co-creation and personal selling. The second group is regime reinforcers. So these utilities worked with traditional partners and new players. They generally served large communities and used mass market communication. And then the final group was transition facilitators. So these utilities worked with all partner segments. They were early adopters of innovative solutions, and they took risks to meet energy transition goals. So the second research question asked how the differences in these business models affect the way the utility participates in the energy transition. And so to answer this question, I imagined placing these business models on the MLP framework. So niche dwellers do just that. They exist at the lower niche level where innovations thrive on a small scale. So for example, a municipal utility, they did not have the resources to install smart meters. So instead they used a marketing campaign where they asked their homeowners to adjust their energy consumption during peak hours. While an innovative solution to their problem, it's not a scalable one, probably wouldn't work in a huge metropolitan city where the utility didn't have that connection with their customers. Next were regime reinforcers. So the utilities with this business model are found at the system level where existing technology, norms, and preferences are reinforced. An example of this business model was a large utility that was shortly releasing its online marketplace to shop for energy efficient products. They weren't avoiding new technology altogether, but they waited until energy efficiency technology had reached mass acceptance before making the investment and jumping in themselves. And then finally, I placed transition facilitators as a boundary spanner between niche and regime. And so utilities in this group adopted new technology from the niche level and used partnerships to bridge these innovations into the regime. So for example, a utility produced an all-in-one online tool that allowed a customer to receive a virtual home audit, purchase products with rebates, schedule and install, all while on the same platform. They pulled these different actors and their technologies together to create a program offering that was accessible to a large group of homeowners. So to conclude, the purpose of the research was to fill the knowledge gap at the intersection of utility energy efficiency programs, business models, and socio-technical transitions. And I found that the utility business model that integrates its product offering with its partnerships is the greatest asset to a society within an energy transition. So that is it for me. Thanks for your time, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you so much, Alex, for being on time. Our next presenter is Heidi Krummel from University of New Brunswick. Hi.
Hello, I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see my slides and hear me okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay, hello, my name is Heidi Krummel. I'm a PhD student at the University of New Brunswick. So my research focuses on an examination of research and development and innovation management practices in Canadian electric power utilities. So essentially, I did a broad exploratory research. I interviewed 35 utility managers and employees across Canada, across 13 different utilities. And essentially trying to get a broad overview of what kind of strategic practices they're incorporating into their innovation and R&D structures. So there's major changes that are occurring in the electric power industry. We've heard a lot about this morning as well, with a strong focus being put on decarbonization, integration of renewable technologies, and implementation of distributed energy resources, just to name a few of those challenges. So the Canadian government, we also know, has set a goal to achieve net zero electricity supply by 2035, and that's so we can contribute to Canada's broader goal of achieving net zero emissions economy-wide by 2050. So research has also shown that in order to reach this net zero 2050 in Canada, that electricity generation may need to double or even possibly triple over the next few decades. So again, this is due to the electrification of various sectors, such as transportation, and of course that requires more electricity to be available. So electricity generators and utilities, they have to substantially not only increase the electricity that they're generating, but they also need to ensure that any additional generation is coming from non-emitting or low-emitting generation sources. So the pace of the low-carbon electricity deployment has to accelerate significantly in order for Canada to reach its target. So the International Energy Agency suggests that the main barriers to faster innovation, it's not just the technologies we talked about this morning, and on the screen I have listed here as well. But it's also the way the energy sector is structured and how it's organized and regulated, and also the existing need for innovation in utilities business models as well. So although the need for an accelerated transition is very evident and utilities acknowledge this, it's very difficult to do so in a system that's very ingrained. So they've developed over many decades, and the alignment and coevolution of all their elements makes them very resistant to change. So there's really been no change in this vertically centralized structure for the past basically 100 years, since the late 1800s. And this is because the design has actually served the industry quite well, because it supports relatively low power rates for consumers, and it also has reliable service. But this structure does now have disadvantages for modernizing the grid, such as inflexible regulatory frameworks and policy frameworks, And also there's risk-averse practices within utilities, and there's a landscape that lacks incentives for utilities to innovate. So if utility, for example, had to choose between a new emerging technology and a conventional technology that both have maybe the same expected rate of return, they'll favor mostly the conventional technology, since usually it will have a lower risk. So regulators also need to play important roles, and they need to examine their ability to impact the innovative environment within utilities. And they need to revisit their current practices and understand whether utilities need more motivation to innovate in ways that will overall benefit the customers and society as a whole. So for my study, I looked at existing business frameworks and concepts that are used in innovation management in other industries. So they included open innovation, lead user innovation, stage gate model, business model canvas, embedded research, and design-driven innovation. And essentially through interviews, I asked the utility management if they were incorporating any of these innovation frameworks or business frameworks. I also asked questions such as overall, what is the structure? How many people are with innovative groups? What type of innovation, incremental, radical, disruptive innovation were they focusing on, and so on. So I won't go through the results of each of these questions, but this is a table of what I would have designed for each of those concepts. So I divided them by provincial, municipal, and publicly traded utilities. There's 13 here, and then identified whether they were practiced, and also some comments by the management or employees of that company. But on top of understanding these individual frameworks and what were being used, I wanted to come up with some more generalized findings from this research. So first of all, the structure of the R&D and innovation groups. There's 3 different ways I found the utilities were structuring their innovation. So first, with external groups, some utilities, mainly large provincially owned crown corporations, they have non-regulated external groups or subsidiaries, and they were designed specifically for innovation purposes. And that allowed the subsidiaries to focus on innovation while the parent company could focus on the main delivering of services. Other utilities had larger parent corporations. So if it was a provincial utility, they might have a national parent organization that covers multiple utilities. And with those organizations, most times the parent organization would be the ones that would have the innovation department or innovation-centered groups, and they would share and diffuse their knowledge downstream to their subsidiaries. And then finally, a lot of organizations had groups or hubs. So these groups varied significantly. It could be from 2 people to over 40 people. That depended on the size and the utility strategy. So overall, I found that the pathway to R&D and innovation in Canadian electric power space so far appears to come from partnerships through external suppliers, through vendors, through startups and other groups. So if the utility didn't have necessarily an internal innovation group, they were partnering with external innovators and bringing those new technologies or business models into the utility. Confirming the existing knowledge, utility employees describe their innovation practices as risk-averse, focusing mostly on incremental innovations. That is changing, but it's still in early stages. There's also a culture of collaboration between utilities. Not a lot of working maybe across jurisdictions with projects, but they would share knowledge at conferences, at events, with national organizations such as EPRI and CIREQ. And essentially, this translates into their innovation and R&D team. So with most utilities, they're still trying to explore what the best structure for these teams are. So a lot of the teams were actually only a year or 2 old. So it's very recent that utilities are starting to implement these innovation teams specifically. A lot of it is informal. It goes through different departments. There's not a clear formalized structure yet. So it's still pretty in early days when figuring out how to organize their innovation and R&D practices. So ultimately, electric power utilities are really at the forefront of Canada's energy transition. Of course, with the recent climate targets, with emerging technologies and new business models, utilities really need to adopt not only to contribute to the sustainable energy transition, but also ensure that they're not falling behind in business practices. So utilities overall recognize the need for adoption and change. So they should closely look into reorganizing and rethinking R&D and innovation business models in order to meet the need of the future energy system in Canada. So again, this perhaps would come with a more collaborative approach, working across provincial boundaries, or with new working groups or business models in general. Okay, and that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. And our next presenter is Katerina Alechovena from University of Calgary.
Yeah,
Hi.
sure. Sure. While I'm sharing my screen, I'd like to mention that I will keep my camera off while presenting because I'm at a hotel right now and the Wi-Fi is giving me
No worries. Okay.
anxiety. Yeah, sorry. Can you see my screen right now? Is it okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'll start then. Hello, everyone. My name is Kate. I'm a doctoral student at Carleton University, Ottawa. And today I'm going to talk about my co-authors and my research on the effectiveness of built-in energy codes. So the adoption of increasingly stringent built-in energy code is a potentially very cost-effective and impactful way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in housing. But however, the development of energy performance requirements for building codes is based primarily on simulation models. But using purely model-based energy-saving predictions results in them being frequently biased because they don't account for actual energy consumer behavior. And this paper uses several unique data sets of not modeled but realized actual energy consumption in residential buildings from 2 provinces in Canada to assess if more stringent building energy code adoptions save energy in your homes. More specifically, we evaluate the change in actual electricity and natural gas use for homes in Ontario and Alberta. So we compare consumption from residences constructed just before and just after the energy code change. Hopefully, this minimizes variation in different observed and unobserved factors that might affect household consumption, such as efficiency requirements on furnaces, major appliances, or, for example, economic shocks, etc. And the residential efficiency requirements in Alberta were first introduced in 2015. And so 2015 is the building code change in the Alberta sample. In Ontario, the Ontario Building Code, adopted in late 1990, included some very major updates to energy efficiency requirements in new housing. And so we define 1991 as the code change year for the Ontario sample. So we first estimate the overall effect of the code change on electricity and gas consumption. The results, you can see them in this table, suggest that building code change has no effect on gas use, second column, but it does cause reduction in electricity consumption, first column. However, if there exists a generalized trend in energy use across years of construction, the change in energy consumption reported in this table could be falsely attributed to the change in the building energy code. And so to further investigate this, we explore longer-term trends in electricity and gas consumption by year of construction. So we look at houses built starting 10 years before the code change. On the horizontal axis, you see the house age relative to the baseline year, which is 1981 for Ontario, 10 years before 1991, and 2005 for Alberta, 10 years before 2015. For example, the value equals 2 for houses built 9 years before the code change in each province. So we go from older houses to newer houses. And at 2, let's say the vertical axis shows the change in electricity or gas consumption for homes built 9 years before the code change, relative to their counterparts built 10 years before the code change. So yeah, and finally, the red vertical line, it corresponds to houses built in the same year as the code change year in each province. So what do we see? We observe a clear overall decrease in electricity consumption for newer homes. This is the figure on your left. As for gas consumption, right, there is an upward pre-trend. So the estimates in the table on the previous slide are likely due to overall changes in energy efficiency over time rather than the code change. And the findings suggest that governments should pay more attention to actual pre-existing time trends in building energy performance while adopting a new energy code in their jurisdictions. In this case, they will be able to make baseline efficiency requirements in the new code more stringent and thereby increasing the chance that the code alone will have a meaningful impact on residential energy consumption. And given the long-lived nature of residential buildings and the fact that incorporating energy-efficient technologies into new houses at the time of construction can cost less than retrofitting existing residential buildings, more stringent building energy code requirements should play a key role in achieving net zero by mid-century. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ekaterina. Our last presenter is Umaru Mudachiro from University of Montreal. Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll try to share my screen.
Sure.
This is not working, so sorry about it. I don't know how to make this. Okay. Can I start? Sorry about that.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So my name is Mudashu. I'm from University of Montreal. So today I will talk about emission offset provision in environmental regulation and the implication in firm-side distribution. So a lot of regulation across the world allow firms to offset the emission by using what we call offset credit. So those offset credits are known to be less expensive than the regular permit. So I will start by defining what offset credit is, and we go from there. So offset credit are permits that come from any greenhouse gas reduction, avoidance or removal project undertaken outside the scope of the regulation. And those credits can be bought purchased by firm to comply with the regulation. Okay, for instance, imagine that we have one firm that is regulated, let's say in Alberta, for instance. Okay, and let's say on the other end we have an NGO that plant trees, and at the end of this plantation, they arrive to remove 100, let's say, CO2 from the atmosphere. So this generates credit that I will call offset credit. So if this firm A can buy those credit to reduce its emission, to let's say to offset its emission, and this firm A will only pay for the remaining emission to the regulator. Okay, so this is the key thing. So the one important thing about those offset credit that are different from the traditional credit is that those offset credit, the price of those credit are unknown to the regulator. So and it is the result of the contract between the seller and the buyer, basically. So the regulator in Alberta don't know. It does not know the price of those credit. Okay, so what is important for him is the amount of CO2 equivalent that this permit counts for, basically. Okay, so from that, my question is, what is the implication of those offset provision on firm-side distribution and aggregate productivity? Okay, so what I did basically is that I take model from firm dynamics. Okay, and I add carbon pricing system where I have heterogeneous firms that differ in their productivity and emission rate. And firm can make a discrete choice on the way that they want to comply with the regulation. Either they can use traditional payment instrument, let's say carbon tax or traditional permit, or they want to use offset permit. Okay, so the third thing is that from what I just explained, the cost of those permits are bargained between the firm that want those offset permit and the buyer, the developer of those offset projects. And from that, I will use the model to evaluate some counterfactual analysis to see what happened, the implication, to quantify the implication of offset credit under different policy scenarios. So here is my findings. So from the empirical part, I used microdata on firm greenhouse gas emission to document two facts. So I will look at 2 dimensions. So the time dimension is that I learned that the use of offset credit increased over time. On average, more than 15% of firms offset the emission, offset more than 60% of the annual emission. And from the cross-sectional dimension, we see that the use of offset credit increased with the firm size. Okay, and from those empirical facts, I will develop a structural model, general equilibrium model, where what I find from that is that the offset provision increase the aggregate TFP. TFP stands for total factor productivity by 0.10%. And this provision also lower the aggregate net emission and increase welfare. So to be specific, it allows new firm to enter into the industry. So we have an increase of 0.45%. And the provision also favor productive firm, okay, by increasing the size, the large firm size and employment. Okay, so this is what I have as finding. So I will go into details if I have time. I will go into detail to tell you how I come up with all those results. So the first thing that I did is that I document around the world the jurisdiction that allow for those provision. Okay, so as you can see, for instance, in Alberta, for Alberta, we have this provision, but Alberta allow firm to offset the emission at 100%. It means that there's no restriction, a quantitative restriction on the use of those permits. Whereas in California, for instance, okay, firm cannot use offset credit more than 8%. Okay, so the key thing to learn from this table is that the use of offset credit is widespread around the world, and but the difference between the jurisdiction by allowing this provision is that some jurisdiction put some quantitative and qualitative restriction, basically. Okay. So this is the first thing. So the second thing that I will do is that I will use microdata on Alberta and California to see what happened at firm level. Okay, is there firm what are the features of those firms that use offset credit, basically? So the first data set that I will use comes from California Carpentry Program, and the second one comes from SCGF from Alberta. Okay, so from these 2 data sets, what we have is that we have information on the annual emission, the allowance, the target that firm have to face in terms of emission, and the number of offset that firm of offset credit that firm surrounded. Okay, and this is the time frame for the 2 data sets. So here's the first part. So the first part is about the time dimension. Okay. So in the first column, you can see the proportion of firms that use offset credit. So basically, in California, for instance, you can see that the proportion of firms that use offset credit increase over time, and we have also the same pattern in Alberta. Okay, And on average, we have more than 50% of firms that offset more than 60% of their annual emission. So this is about the type dimension. So so one question that can arise is that we know that a lot of firms use offset coding, but what are those firms? Are they the small firm or the larger firm? This brings me to divide firm in terms of 5 groups. So each group will be what we call quintile. So quintile 1 means that the smallest firm. Okay, we have 20% of firm, the lowest emitters. Okay, and quintile 5 means the large emitters. Okay, so we can see that the share of firm and also the share of emission that is offset increase with the group of firm, meaning that the large emitters are those that use intensively the offset provision. And this is true for Alberta and California. Okay. And from those findings, empirical findings, I want to understand what had those implications in terms of aggregate macroeconomic variable, such as aggregate productivity, total emission, and output. Okay, so this brings me to a macroeconomic model that I will not have time to present, but basically I go through different steps, define the problem of the different agents, calibrate the model, and quantify the implication of those offset coding. Okay, so here's the key result. Okay, so to see how this offset provision affect the aggregate variable that you can see in the first column. Okay, the first thing to do is to solve the model where you put I normalize the aggregate variable to 100. Okay, and then you solve the model when you remove that provision from the model. Okay, and you see how those aggregate variable changes. So for instance, output here, okay, decreased by 0.44% when we remove offset provision. It means that offset provision allow the economy to have more output because we have more input. Okay, and it also allow incentivize new firm to enter to the industry. Okay, so this is my last diapo. So to understand my result, what happened is that so in the first graphic, I put the size of firm in the x-axis, and in the y-axis, I put the percentage point change. Okay. So what we learn is that removing offset provision decrease the share of firm that are decrease the share of large firm. Okay, and this decrease is redistributed to the small firm. This what happened when we remove offset provision. Basically, so this shows us how the offset provision affect the size of affect the firm size distribution, basically. So in the second graphic, we see what happened in terms of emission. So basically, the emission of the large emitter decrease, while the emission of the smaller emitters increase, basically. So this is the end of my result of my presentation. Thank you. And feel free to ask questions about the model if you are interested. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mudashiro. Just a reminder for our in-person attendees, we are going to collect the dishes at 2:30. So if you are going to use it, just make sure to use it before the collecting. If you have any question, you just raise your hand. Even the Zoomers, you can put it in chat. Our presenters are more than happy to answer your questions. Oh, there's one question. Just pass the microphone. Thank you.
I have a question for the last presenter, Moody. Okay, for the last presenter.
Yes, Mudashiro is
Yeah,
okay.
Mudashiro, excuse me. In your presentation, I just want to check if I understand well. Are you saying that offset emissions are more efficient in terms of carbon footprint for firms? Or can you just be more explicit about that?
Okay, so one thing that we know from the literature is that those offset credits are less expensive than the regular permit. Okay, so this is the first thing, and from that, what that implies that firm will utilize this lower price, lower cost, let's say lower cost way of compliance, okay, to have higher input to produce more. You see what I mean? So I'm not talking about efficiency, okay? My paper is more a positive analysis than a normative analysis, okay?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other question?
Edward. Thanks for your presentations. I had a question for, I'm sorry, I forget the name. I think it was Katerina about building our energy codes. I'm wondering if there was some way to account for the counterfactual of what would have happened to energy consumption in the absence of the changes in the codes.
Yeah, we try to do that, but unfortunately we don't have enough data to account for that. So maybe we could use another province and try to form a control group for the treated buildings, but unfortunately we cannot do so. That's why we use just, you see this pre and post comparison, which obviously lacks accuracy. And then as a check, we decided to do that pre-trend analysis and found out that you see there is a huge increase in electricity savings. So due to some, generalized trend. So so far that's our conclusion. But of course, we might try to do something quasi-experimental to, account for different observed and unobserved factors. Yes.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Hello. Another question for Katerina, actually. So basically, I was wondering, you talked about the difference between, or like the effect you saw in electricity versus the effect you saw in gas. And I was wondering whether you can comment a little bit more on basically reasons you suspect you didn't see such a decrease in the amount of gas consumption.
We are actually working on it right now because unfortunately there is not enough data, to find the reason for that. Maybe there is a lack of code compliance. Maybe there is some specific about gas usage in Canada because obviously, we are heating our homes all the time with gas. So we are trying to uncover that what's going on right now. That's basically the second part of our paper because obviously so far it lacks understanding of why is it happening right now. Yeah, good question. Thank you. I know we need to do that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Hello, I have a question from Kate, and I think you had two categories of like before and after code change groups of single family homes. Could you please explain a little bit about the variables, because houses can be different in terms of size, directions, even the windows, even the education of the residents. It can affect the results. How did you control those variables?
Yeah, so we do have information on house size and year of construction, which are usually the main variables that affect consumption, both electricity and gas. So in all of our equations, our dependent variable is the consumption, gas or electricity, divided by the house size. So we try to account for house size doing this. Year of construction, obviously we have our pre and post code change variables, so we cannot incorporate that, but of course it it means that we control for that. In addition to that, we do have month by province fixed effects to account for different, time varying observed and unobserved factors that can affect electricity and gas consumption of households. So far, of course, we might have maybe more control variables to, control for more things. But again, we don't have enough data. That's the main problem. But we are trying to work on that. Maybe we will do some robustness checks to do some different fixed effects. Something else, again, as the first, I had a question about, control group. Also, we might try to do that because we do need to account for more factors in this research, because we are claiming a very strong statement here that basically quotes do not do anything. It's just, overall trend. That's, I know we need to work on that more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other question? I have a question from Ekaterina. I would like to know if there is any difference if we integrate the energies, sustainable energies in the building during the construction in comparison with retrofitting the current instruction, current buildings. Is there any difference?
You mean to add a control variable if a certain house did some kind of retrofitting during the experiment period?
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually a very good question, because again, data. We have a third data set. We're working on it right now. We also have data from New Brunswick in terms of energy consumption and different controls as house size and house age. And I believe in that data set, we do have information about which houses did some energy efficiency upgrades in the past. And I'm pretty sure we will control for that in that study. But for Alberta and Ontario, we don't have these variables. As a result, we cannot really control for that, but maybe we can figure out some proxies for these, energy efficient retrofits that happened in the past. So yeah, I think that's a good suggestion.
Thank you. And another question from Mudashiro.
Yes, please.
I wanted to know if the removal of offset provision impact the value of the large firms, except from the size.
So, okay, how can I answer this? Except from the size. Yeah. So what you mean is that is it that the offset provision only affect firms through their size? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, just size or other parameters. Do you have any idea, or did you get any results about it?
I'm not sure if I understand what your question. So, so what you asking me is that is there another way that that provision affect firms?
Yeah, I mean the large firms. Did it affect just the large firm or a small
Yeah.
firm?
So my model is built from the fact that I observed the data. So from the data, the fact one. The fact two, I show that the offset provision is used mainly by the large emitters, by the large firm, basically. So removing this provision will only affect those that use that provision, which are the large firm, basically.
Okay, thank you. And I remember that you mentioned about welfare in Greece. Did you measure it? And if yes, how did you measure?
Yeah, good question. So I measured that. I measured the welfare in terms of consumption equivalent. Okay, so basically what you did is that you compute the utility, household utility in the two case scenario. Okay, and then you see how the consumption is, what is the percentage of consumption that household or citizen are willing to get rid of in order to having or not having the offset provision, because by having the offset provision, aggregate output increase, which means that the consumption also will increase, basically. So by computing the welfare in terms of consumption equivalent, it is a traditional way to compute the welfare when we are not sure about the overall factor that may be involved in terms of well-being.
Thank you. You answered my question very well. And another question from Heidi.
Yes.
I wanted to know how do you have any idea that how can a government do some aggressive measurements to push the industries or buildings to be more sustainable?
Yeah, so did you say, I think mostly it's in regulatory frameworks. So a lot of the themes that came up consistently in the interviews that I conducted with utility management spoke specifically about the regulatory frameworks and the decentivization from those regulatory frameworks, which they understand are required to keep prices low and reliability for consumers. But there's a paradox between the need to innovate and still remain risk averse. So regulatory frameworks and policymakers, they all agree have a huge role to play in just making the environment more acceptable for utilities to be able to innovate.
Thank you. And do you know any real examples that could be successful in this field?
So for example, in most provinces, if I say in New Brunswick here, if I was to have solar panels and I wanted to, and I had excess power producing that I didn't use, I'm not allowed to sell that to my neighbor, sell it back into the grid. And that's common in most provinces. In Newfoundland and Labrador, it's the same thing. And just one example on top of my mind. So they recently this year just opened up, they allowed private wind producers in Newfoundland and Labrador. So that will add more capacity into the grid and also creates more versatility and flexibility. So those are just some examples from some policy and regulatory issues that might be able to help with the transition.
Thank you. Yes, no more question. Then I think we can wrap up the session and go for a break. And our next session on positive transformation will start at 2. See you again. Bye. Thank you.
All right, everyone. It looks like we're ready to start. Okay, so this is our last session of the conference. It's been really awesome so far. A few technical difficulties, but that always happens, so I think it's been great. So our last session is called Positive Transformations. I'd also like to say that maybe some of these, aren't so positive. So it kind of goes both ways in here. So to start, we've got Bowen first, and he's in person. Then we have Eklis, and he'll be online. Third is Stephanie, she's also in person. Fourth, we have Adaku, and fifth, we have Vincent. Also, because we do have the cocktail event after this, and it's a booking at a set time, I'm gonna time everyone and be kind of strict with it. So you have 5 minutes to present, but I'll give you up to 7. But at 7 minutes, I'm going to let you know it's been 7 minutes and you have 30 seconds to finish, just because we want to have some discussion time before we leave. All right, so without any further ado, we have Bowen from Concordia University. I'll just share your screen.
All right. Do you hear me? All right. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bowen, and today I'm going to share my research on the impacts of climate change on water quality in Montreal's urban stormwater systems. The goal in this study was to understand and quantify the effects of climate change on water quality in Montreal's urban stormwater systems. My aim was to create a, yeah, that's the page I'm talking right now. I forgot to switch it. My aim was to create a predictive model for assessing water quality under different climate change scenarios and to propose adaptation strategies. To achieve this, I used open data from the City of Montreal's QUALO program and climate data from Environment and Climate Change Canada, spanning from 2003 to 2022. Now, before starting the analysis, it was necessary to pre-process and integrate the data. This involved a series of steps, including renaming and merging files, translating headers, cleaning the data, and ensuring compatibility. Several key features were selected for the analysis. For example, the parameters like water temperature, pH, fecal coliforms, and the total precipitations, etc. Now is the step for the exploratory data analysis. The EDA reviewed a total of 27,348 samples from 5 different water bodies. Each body of water contributed a unique number of samples, providing a diverse data set. So right now we have 6 data sets, 5 individual data sets from each water body, and a total data set. So I run this correlation coefficient matrix for each data set, and I found some interesting correlations among the chosen features. The first, water temperature showed a strong correlation with ambient temperature, which is super intuitive. However, its correlation with pH varied across water bodies, suggesting that local environmental factors play a crucial role. In addition, fecal coliform levels seem to be influenced by rainfall events. This is a correlation observed for the individual data sets, but not observed in the aggregated data set, which is also bizarre, let's say. Now, I have tried, oops, sorry. Oh, I forgot to change my, okay, sorry. Now it's the total, now, well, I have tested 5 machine learning models. So a comparative analysis, and then I make the comparative analysis, focusing on predicting water temperature. That's one of the features. I only test that for the water temperature prediction and in the entire data set. So that's for the total data set. Among them, gradient boosting, random forest, and the XGBoost regressors performed significantly well. In particular, the XGBoost regressor came out on top with the highest R-square score and the lowest errors, indicating superior prediction capabilities. I said there were 5 machine learning models. So the first one is the the support vector regressor, and the 5th one is the neural network deep learning. But these 2 are not very not very performing. Well, in order to optimize the performance for these 5 chosen algorithms, I conducted hyperparameter tuning for these algorithms. However, just to be clear, it's very important to note that these results could vary with different datasets or with more exhaustive hyperparameter tuning. All right. Now, in summary, all right, the analysis showed that tree-based ensemble models, particularly the XGBoost, outperformed others for the specific task. However, the selection of a suitable model should always take into account the peculiarities of your specific dataset, computational efficiency, and interpretability. Looking towards future work, I intend to expand the models to predict other water quality parameters like conductivity, pH, and fecal coliforms. I also plan to include additional variables relevant to water quality and employ time series analysis to better capture temporal trends and seasonality.
To address the impacts of climate change on water quality, I propose several strategies. Some of them are based on my findings, the others are super general. These include implementing predictive models, upgrading infrastructure based on the data-driven models, promoting green urban planning, running public awareness campaigns, that's for the public, and also enforcing climate-informed regulations, which is like the data-driven regulations in the end, devising improved reservoir management strategies. Well, thank you for your attention. I would be happy to answer any questions after everybody. Thanks.
Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. It's really interesting. So up next we have, I'm just going to stop sharing. We have Eklis Al-Sahaf from University of New Brunswick. Go ahead and share your screen.
Hello, everyone. Today I need to present my paper about uncovering greenwashing and corporate sustainability disclosure, the impact on climate change effort. First, before the second slide, please. Before we start, we need to know what greenwashing is. I know some of you know what greenwash, but the definition of greenwash is the behavior or activity that make people believe a company is doing more to protect the environment than it actually is. For example, the second slide, please. For example, Microsoft company, in this example, I show the CSR report, our corporate sustainability report for 2020, that show in the section of climate and environment participate 91% toward climate and environment. That explained by Surface Laptop 3 assists 91% of recyclable. The question here, what about the other protect for this company? And also there is a study or there is article about criticize the company by partnering with oil and gas company. So this can include under greenwash or not? This is the question for the audience. To solve more about this topic, second slide, please. The question is, how does greenwashing and corporate sustainability disclosure impact effort to address climate change? There is 4 sections to answer this question. The second slide, please. First, diversing of resources and attention. Focus and funding may be diverted from effective effort to reduce climate change due to greenwashing. Company that spend more time pretended to be sustainable than actually making fundamental change, remove funding from intention that can actually help reduce greenhouse gas emission and battle climate change. Second, the other slide. Business that engage in greenwashing could deceive consumer into thinking they are doing a lot to address climate change, when in the reality, they may doing a little, or they didn't do nothing, because this delay in taking early action slow the transition to low carbon and the necessary adjustment to tackle the climate change. The third section, the other slide, please. Embedding customer shoes. Greenwashing may trick customer into making purchases of deceive sustainable product. It's difficult for customer to demand and support reality sustainable solution when they cannot tell the difference between truly sustainable product and those that are simply green. For example, the other slide, please. For example, Adidas in 2020 They boast of having product 15 to 20 million pair of shoes that haven't that produce from recycled plastic waste from beaches and ocean region. But that is just 5% of 400 billion shoes that the company protect in the year base. So every year they protect 4 million shoes, but they just participate 5% of this. When you go to website of Adidas, you see there this shoes is sustainable. So it's mean. The second slide, please. Greenwash. The fourth section is the regulatory framework and the standard. The regulatory intended to promote sustainable and prevent climate change. This is the regulatory. But when business can make false claim, then they did not face any consequence that will decrease the effectiveness of sustainability, or they will reduce the effective of the regularity. The third slide, please. There is a few ways to measure greenwash because that affect the climate change. One of them it's comparative analysis by examining the sustainable and environmental performance climb and analyze the connected between announcements goal for sustainability and measured outcome. The second point to measure greenwash is carbon footprint analysis. There is 2 points under this way. It is assess a company greenhouse gas emission across all of its operation. Or compare the reported emission reduction target with the actual progress. The third way to measure greenwash is conducted a survey. Can go to the other slide, please. Yes, conducted a survey for customer, such as customer, employees, and business leader to assess the sustainable climate. The fourth thing is to analyze the sustainability report and the media because they are disclosure about the sustainability. The fifth way, some research, they depend on the third-party organization, such as a Bloomberg or MSSMI. These organization can offer some certificates such as ESG score or environment, social, government score for some company. Finally, the final slide, please. There is some way to spot greenwash. First, look behind the buzzword. What I mean by buzzword, eco-friendly. Now we can see some company that said eco-friendly, sustainable, go green, natural. So all these named buzzword because they are now making just for advertising. Sometimes they make some, but little then they advertise. So the customer must go behind this buzzword, or he might make research what behind this buzzword. So look behind the buzzword, do your research, use your common sense, rely on the right resource. Thank you for listening, and I am happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like we hear the word greenwashing too often, but I haven't ever seen research on it, so that was really interesting. Thank you. So up next, we have Adaku Nchendu from Queen's University. Go ahead and share your screen.
Why you don't want to know? Yeah, hi everyone. I'm happy to be here to present to make my presentation titled Broadening the Discourse Around Managed Retreats as a Climate Adaptation Strategy. Flooding remains the most costly, damaging, and frequent disaster across the globe. However, some countries like Nigeria will experience the impacts more than others due to lower resilience capacities. Nigeria is prone to annual flooding that has seen areas not historically prone to flood beginning to experience flooding on a growing basis. My research studied fluvial flooding in Port Harcourt, a coastal city of about 2 million people. It engaged with residents with experience of flooding as well as experts with relevant knowledge on the phenomenon to gain insight into the experience of flooding, their perceptions of the link between climate change and flooding. My research also sought insights on adaptation approaches to the problem given the worsening climate crisis. Actions to protect communities and manage disaster risk has overly focused on improving infrastructural resilience, but trends indicate that this may not be enough. This implies it is time to deepen conversations centered around other adaptation strategies like planned retreats. Planned retreats, also referred to as managed retreats or planned relocation, refers to directed measures that are initiated, supervised, and financed by state authorities, whereby communities comprised of private households relocate from a high risk to a low risk location to resettle on a permanent basis. A risk-based disaster analysis indicates that no matter the level of infrastructural investment to control flooding, it may not be enough to save those communities most at risk. In such cases, planned retreats could be the most sustainable and rational approach to protecting and moving people and assets out of harm's way. The benefits of planned relocation include not having to continuously invest taxpayers' money in areas that increasingly suffer flooding, where no sustainable solution is in sight. This needs to happen with meaningful involvement of concerned communities to facilitate justice. So far, many successfully undertaking managed retreats, including here in Canada, have adopted a top-down, non-collaborative and ad hoc approach, with the government initiating and setting the modalities surrounding this. Planned retreat therefore has environmental justice implications, especially when decisions are made in a top-down manner. Environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. Engaging with communities to understand their preferences or willingness to relocate is the first step to environmental justice by ensuring people's preferences are considered in planned retreat decisions. So my research was a mixed method study, but what I'm presenting here is just the quantitative aspects of my research. So questionnaire surveys were used to elicit responses from people who have lived experience of flooding. The questionnaire collected demographic and socioeconomic data as well as information related to the experiences of flooding. They were distributed in person by 4 research assistants and a guide who lived in each of the surveyed communities in the study city of Port Harcourt. So the survey was hosted on Portrix and 401 fully completed and valid responses were received. The resultant data was analyzed using Portrix, Microsoft Excel, and SPSS. An overwhelming 91% of the respondents indicated willingness to relocate due to flooding. So they were asked, are you willing to relocate due to flooding? However, 15% of the respondents were homeowners. The overwhelming willingness to relocate could be attributed to the lack of ties home ownership could give. This is because home ownership makes people grounded in their communities and more likely to have established enduring community ties. However, the 91% who have here indicates that even homeowners were willing to relocate due to the challenges of flooding. Also, the 9% who didn't want to relocate mainly cited financial constraints, indicating they do not believe their financial position will improve to such an extent in the near future they can afford to relocate. Certainly, relocation comes with it a lot of stress and financial costs, which many residents may be constrained to undertake. So this overwhelming willingness to relocate is another indicator of the burden perennial flooding places on victims who, if they had means, would relocate to less flood-prone environments. It could also be an indicator that the burden of flooding is much greater than any place attachment they may have, or that frequent flooding has made them not establish place attachment. And place attachment is important within the context of this discussion, because it's a factor not to make people and long-term residents of disaster-prone communities unwilling to relocate. So in this case, the overwhelming willingness to relocate and the citation of financial constraints for those unwilling to relocate means that managed retreat or relocation of these flood-prone settlements is possible. This finding has important policy implications as it means that residents could be convinced to relocate to less hazardous areas if there is proper engagement on the part of the government. So as planned retreat is an issue of environmental justice, a step in achieving environmental justice is seeking the opinion of the people who may be forced to relocate due to flooding and other climate disasters. As has been seen here, there was a 91% willingness to relocate, and even those who didn't want to relocate cited financial constraints as their reason. So we also see here that place attachment was low, and I attribute this to the residents' experience of recurrent flooding. Finally, approaching a planned retreat with an environmental justice lens is crucial and would ensure that residents feel or even lead they are part of or even lead decision making for success to be achieved surrounding this and other climate adaptation measures we may be forced to undertake. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I could see, like, if I was living somewhere and kept being flooded and damaged, I could probably like not feel so attached and also want to leave at that point. So last but not least, we have Vincent Abe Inge from McGill University. You can go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, so I'm starting all over. My name is Vincent Abe Inge. I'm presenting on the sustainability compliance of the Canadian food supply. So in recent times, the food choices that we make and also the eating habits that we make have been linked to the rising rates of environmental damage over the years, including biodiversity loss. And these have been attributed mainly to animal-based food production. A study in 2021 reported that the dietary choices among Canadians yielded an average of 3.9 kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalents of greenhouse gas emissions per capita per day. And out of these emissions, about 75% of it is due to animal-based foods, and then also processed meats and red meat contributed to about 47% of these emissions. Overall, food systems greenhouse gas emissions were estimated to be 35% of the total greenhouse gas emissions of Canada. And I think from the previous presentations that we've received, the goal is to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions in Canada, policy that come from the Canadian economy. So in order to let's say achieve a reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions that come from our dietary choices, there have been several proposals to do so, and some of them include the dietary guidelines, which I am going to focus my presentation on. So among these dietary guidelines, we have both local and then global dietary guidelines, including the Canada's Food Guide and then the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet. They mainly